Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode number 136 of the official video gaming podcast of the Embracer Group. I'm, of course, talking about the SuperShow podcast. That's right, Jonesy. We, just like everyone else, have officially been embraced. We are now powered by the Embracer Group. You're now my Embracer Group co-worker. How's it feel?
I feel warm, as you would when you get a nice big hug from a giant company who can wrap their long green money arms around you. No, Jamie, we haven't been embraced.
What?
I would love to be embraced. I would love to get some of that sweet Embracer Group huggage.
I just thought that was how it worked. You kind of just sat around twiddling your thumbs long enough and eventually you got I thought a video game is all about acquisitions. It's all about intellectual property. Someone told me, Jonesy, that we were going to get to make the next Darksiders game. I know there's only 3 of us, but apparently we're in charge. And then MX versus ATV after that. Thoughts?
I think we probably could have done a better job of Darksiders than they did for 3. Maybe not with ATEC, with the other one. What is it? MTX ATV?
MX versus ATV. It's an American thing. They like dirt.
Motocross.
Bikes. They like going off ramps. Okay, well, that's a sad kind of crashing down to reality that I'm not sure I needed that early in the podcast. I actually now need to call Chris because he's actually on a business trip right now in Vienna. I told him to fly out there to close the deal. I told him that the paperwork was all drawn up. He just needed to sign across the dotted line. You're now informing me that that's not the way that video game acquisition works.
Do you reckon you could get sued for saying you or someone bought you when they didn't? Even like there was no... You know, if you was not malicious, you was no ill intent, but you just said, we've just been bought, and then but you didn't say, no, it was a joke. They were like, we don't want to be associated with you.
It would probably depend on a few things. Like, let's say, for example, you were a gaming podcast and you did to pretend that you were acquired by the Embracer Group, and then it transpired that somehow your viewership or listenership was so large that the value of the Embracer Group went up, and that we were already shareholders in the Embracer Group, and that we dumped all our money as soon as the podcast went live, or something weird like that, just a pump and dump. Then maybe we'd get in trouble.
I think we'd get in trouble. I think if we said we've been bought by Embracer Group and then we did a whole news story about Embracer Group, because then people would think we had some sort of insider information and would they'd take us more seriously than they would if they knew who we were really and that we weren't owned by the Embracer Group.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we're not owned by the. I'd happily be embraced. I have no problem with it. I know some people in the games industry are they're getting a little bit testy around the whole Embracer Group.
Would we have to close down our patrons, though? Because at the moment, I like to think of it as us being a patron-backed, and then kind of patron almost, not like owned, it's not ownership. That would be like modern-day slavery if our patrons had ownership over us. But it's like a partnership.
They're our board of directors.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. With employees, like, Chris is the regional manager, you're assistant to the regional manager, I'm an intern, and our patrons are the board of directors.
And then I guess if we were bought by Embracer Group, then they could just be the chair of the board of directors. So that would work. They could sit at the head of the table.
They'd all get paid off. People would look up their sort of the lifetime amount spent on the patron. That would all get paid back tenfold, and then they'd be allowed to go on their way. Yeah. But no, look, at the end of the day, Jonesy, this is in fact a gaming podcast, and the reason I brought up the Embracer Group as early as I did is because through no fault of our own, we're going to actually end up spending most of today talking about them. Such is the never-ending, ever-growing reach of the Embracer Group, who, if you don't know, are basically one massive giant media holding company who have spent the best part of the last decade acquiring everything from publishers to developers to various pieces of intellectual property. And that means that as today, Jonesy, we're going to talk about, say, the THQ Nordic showcase that happened last week that featured the return of a much longed for, much beloved horror series, as we're going to talk about a couple of retail leaks that have happened in the past week, courtesy of Amazon, that point to, say, the return of another slightly more controversial horror-themed franchise that has been long thought dead. And we're going to talk about all kinds of stuff like that. It all inevitably gets tangled up in the Embracer Group, but then that's business, I guess, right?
Yep. The Embracer Group are really embracing the news cycle this week. They're
big
really,
time.
Taking it on.
They're like, we heard the SuperShow podcast last week. We know that the preview cycle is still, hot and heavy. We got Gamescom coming up. We got all the kinds of shit happening in the next couple of months. Now's the time to own the headlines. And if you want to let us know what you think of those headlines, you can join us. You can head over to YouTube, where your Get the video version of this podcast complete with a comment section that you can contribute to. Anything you type in that comment section will inevitably be read by us, even if it's blocked by like a spam filter, or if you send us porn links or something like that. Technically, we can read it. Those are the privileges we get as creators. Whether or not we choose to make that public, that's our choice. But we can read it. And if there are dodgy links, here's a hint, Jonesy will click on them. You can also find us on Twitter at SuperShowPod. Get involved, tweet at us, DM Chris, do whatever you want to. Or if you just want the simplest version of this podcast, I'm talking about audio, you can head over to podcasting platforms like Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, and just listen to it. Which, again, no fuss, no confusion, no faces, no kind of, like, ugliness. Just pure voices, harmony.
But you know what? I did that this last week. I was listening to a podcast yet again on YouTube, where I wasn't watching it, I wasn't looking at it, and it was just in my pocket as I was like going around doing stuff. And I suddenly thought, why am I doing this? It's on Spotify. So I went onto Spotify and I listened to it there instead, and it was much easier, and I could turn my phone off, and I didn't have the video playing in my pocket while I was walking around.
Yes.
And I baffled myself that I didn't think about maybe to do that sooner.
No, it's far more convenient, because you always have that moment as well where you're considering buying or subscribing to YouTube Premium, and you're like, oh, because if YouTube Premium, I can lock my phone and it still plays.
Yeah.
I don't have to like put it in my pockets backwards so the touchscreen is like facing outwards and doesn't rub up against my leg.
Or you if you walk a bit too briskly, it thinks you've given it a shake and skipped or something.
Yeah, that's happening a lot to me lately. My music will suddenly stop and I'll pull my phone out, and it'll tell me it's sort of like locked for security measures or something like that for a minute.
Right.
And I have no idea what it's about, but I'm gathering it's something to do with my leg pushing buttons. I'm just glad I haven't called 999 yet.
Yes, that would be embarrassing, and then all the caller on the other end can just hear your scrot rubbing up against your leg.
Yeah, it's just rustling.
Like, sorry, who's this? What's going on? Oh, this is terrible. We'll send an ambulance immediately.
Exactly, because they can triangulate my position and work out exactly. It's like 24. I've seen the TV show. I know how it works. They would find me and they would kill me.
They would. They would rescue your scrot and leave the rest of you.
Do you know what would have saved me? Is if instead of listening to this podcast on a platform like Spotify, I just waited till it was broadcast out on digital radio at convenient places like paisleyradio.com. Because if you head over there at Thursdays at 10 p.m, or if you miss that Mondays at 10 p.m, then you can catch this very show being broadcast into your ears, and you don't need to worry about your position being triangulated and emergency services tracking you down. One of the many perks and benefits of this show.
It's the off the grid way to enjoy the Super Show.
Exactly.
Although you kind of still need to be on the grid to hear it.
You need to. Some partial grid life needs to be lived to just the bare minimum. I don't know how big or how much data it would use to just download or stream the audio version of this podcast, but that's all you need. Just emerge from your bunker once a week, get like 3G, like I said, the bare minimum, or even Edge. E and just
Edge.
Yeah, exactly. Was that what the E was for? Edge.
Yeah, no, it was Edge, wasn't it?
Yeah,
yeah. You can be really edgy, and you can listen to the Super Show podcast.
I remember thinking that like technology was never gonna, could not possibly exceed the day when my dad, in the back of a black cab in London, was able to use his BlackBerry to find a football score, and it only took him 15 minutes. And I was like, the future's here. We've done it. It's like, you know what? Fuck teletext. We're in a moving vehicle finding out football scores.
What's hilarious? I was the same, but what's hilarious about that is like nowadays sometimes it's quicker if I use my phone as a hotspot to connect my laptop to than it is to like actually use Wi-Fi, which seems bizarre. Like, how's that happen? But it's amazing. It's incredible.
I don't know. It's a mixture of sometimes of speed and also habit. Like, I find myself, not because it's faster, but I'll be sat there, I'm on my computer, I've got, the world of Google Chrome in front of me, other browsers are available, and I'll sat there and I'll pull my phone out and start scrolling through Twitter, and I'm like, I'm sat at my computer, and I could have just started typing in twitter.com and it would have autofilled, and I'd have got the exact same experience, except I would have been able to hear the videos that play because I've got my headphones on. But here I am looking at my phone with my hand resting on my desk that my computer's on. It's a very, it makes me worry for us as a race and as a people.
Yeah, we're done, aren't we? We're not going to last much longer. Enjoy it while you can, people, because it's the end of the world as we know it.
Yeah, and do you know what makes life and the world as we know it far more enjoyable, Jonesy?
Friends?
Partially, but I'm thinking something a little bit more important, a little bit more vital to the human experience.
Loved ones.
A little bit more important still. I could do without those.
Water.
It's the thing that this video game's about. This I just said it. It's the thing that this podcast is about.
Is it video games?
It's video games. Although water is up there. Water's a close second. If I could have water and video games in partnership, then I'd be living the dream. Do you know who else is really hot on video games right now?
Who's the guy who used to be the head who died? Patrick Moore in Games Master used to float around with a little thing in his eye talking about video games, but he's dead now, so maybe not him.
That's a great answer to that question, albeit a dead individual. It's also just a fun throwback. And I'm talking about Disney, who, I guess prior to the days of Embracer Group, they were the previous pretenders to the throne of the I'm going to be the company that owns everything company. They're probably still at it.
They have tried to do that, haven't they, as well?
Yeah.
It's just in a different way.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff happens over there in America where I don't really understand. Like, I don't know what Time Warner means, so the significance of this transaction is somewhat lost on me, but I understand that this is a big deal. It's those kind of things. AT&T, never heard of it. We just don't have it over here.
We don't.
But what we do have are video games, and Disney are getting increasingly involved in video games. It's interesting, Josie. I was watching a podcast this week. I don't know if you sort of saw it on your feed at all, or if you saw tweets about it, because it did make a few headlines where a former, I've got to get this right, Avalanche Studios developer was being interviewed by Ben Hansen over at MinMax and talked about how Avalanche, the team behind, this is the Just Cause Avalanche, for those wondering, not the Hogwarts Legacy Avalanche. They were briefly working on an Iron Man game around 2012, and it got cancelled. And they were talking in that podcast about how 2012 was something of a weird time for Disney games. Like, they were experimenting with different things, but like, were they still working with other publishers? Were they publishing games themselves? They had weird experiments like Disney Infinity that didn't always work out. They were taking individual licenses and individual pieces of intellectual property and partnering with certain publishers on them, like the deal with EA and Star Wars that was in place for many years. But now it seems like they are spreading their wings and have reached the point where they're actually able to host a game-focused digital showcase that's going to happen this September that, doesn't have much to go, there's not much to say for it in terms of what they've announced will be there, but when you start reading into what could be there, you realise just how much Disney have going on in the video game department. So if I get the boring stuff out of the way first, Jonesy, Disney Dreamlight Valley, which I think got announced in a Nintendo stream a couple of months ago. Additional news on Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. More news on the recently delayed, in fact, Marvel's Midnight Suns. That kind of stuff. It's just them basically listing the known Disney properties that are either out there, about to come out, or have recently come out. It's when you start looking at stuff that could be there, or stuff that we know less about, that things get exciting. One thing that has been confirmed is we will get a glimpse of Skydance New Media's new game, which is said to be a Marvel Ensemble game. And for anyone who doesn't recall Skydance New Media, that was the sort of the new studio set up and fronted by former Naughty Dog creative director and Uncharted original trilogy director Amy Hennig. So one would think, like a third-person action-adventure game, maybe?
You'd hope, and that, I mean, that has all the ingredients to be something really exciting. But then, of course, if you think about the most recent Marvel Ensemble game, it's maybe less so. But then, that's unfair. There's so much you can do with an IP, and depends what sort of game you're going to make. And Amy Hennig is a big name and has got a very good pedigree. So you would hope that she's going to put something together that's very good.
You'd think so, and I don't want to pigeonhole Amy Hennig, but you'd think if you want to capture some of that Uncharted magic, you're talking about something a little bit more cinematic, something a little bit more linear, something that doesn't really lend itself to what you'd imagine a quote ensemble game looks like. Is it unfair of me to worry at this stage that this is going to be a case of, up to 4-player co-op being ham-fisted into an experience, maybe a la Marvel's Avengers?
I hope they steer clear of 4-player co-op. Like, altogether, I would like them to steer clear of that. I think you can still have a Marvel Avengers Ensemble game that has some co-op elements or multiplayer elements or whatever that doesn't feel like another Marvel's Avengers game. I think going down the route of, third-person action, like you said, more linear, maybe with some hub world elements, etc., I think that's totally doable without making it feel like another one of these open world, like small open world, kind of replayable, like endless loop style games that we've seen a lot recently. I would really hope it's not. I want it to go down the Uncharted route of being,
Totally.
levels broken up, areas that you run through. You could play with a partner. You can do it as a co-op mission as opposed to like a 4-player. Because the 4-player co-op type games that we're talking about, they never feel that have been out recently. They never feel like 4-player co-op mission-based, story-based games. They always feel like, oh, these are levels that you can rerun and you can do again and you can add like modifiers to and you can replay and da-da-da-da-da-da. I don't want that. That's not what Uncharted was. I want a game which I want to play through from start to finish with a friend, maybe where you're switching between characters at some, throughout the game if it's story relevant. Maybe that would feel a bit weird. It's hard to know, but
it is hard to know. I mean, there are
so much they can do with Marvel, with the Avengers, with those characters. I mean,
it's true.
It shouldn't be difficult. It shouldn't be hard to make a decent game out of that. Like, I think the only problem they do have is the problem that the overpowered thing comes, like Superman, Iron Man. This is why Iron Man games are shit. It's because how do you make a game around a guy who can fly, who has, AI targeting, locking, blah, 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 blah. It just gets boring. It's the same as Superman.
Maybe this is a good point to interject with what one of the leading rumors around this Marvel Ensemble game is, and that is a potential Fantastic Four game, which you then start to feed into this idea of, okay, not only do you have a natural fit in terms of it, it's an established 4-piece troupe. You're not mashing 4 separate characters together, but also, and don't get me wrong, I know this is all stuff that could have been said of Marvel's Avengers, so I'm being somewhat cautious here, but they are all different, and they would all play differently, and if they composed an experience where one had to, for different reasons, play as the Thing, and then play as the Human Torch, and then play as, I mean, don't get me wrong, the stealth levels where you have to play as Jessica Alba and turn invisible are probably not going to be the most exciting, but there's a maneuverability there, and I'd be interested to see. I watched the Gotham Knights. I know that's DC, but I watched the Gotham Knights video earlier today as part of IGN First's preview rollout, and they are sticking with this angle of, like, yes, there are multiple characters in this game, and yes, there's co-op, but we want this to be a game where, rather than switching between all 4 of the characters, you find the one you like best and stick with them and make your version of Robin the best version of Robin, rather than getting sidetracked by switching to someone else.
Yeah, see, I'm worried about Gotham Knights. Like, I don't think,
me too.
Like, everything I've seen of that doesn't suggest to me it's moving in the right direction. So the idea that that this, even if it is a Fantastic Four game, like that does sound cool. Like, so don't get me wrong, I do like 4-player co-op games where they give you different characters that you can be, and you've got different strengths, different weaknesses. I prefer games where they actually go further down that route, where they say, no, you can't fight like this person. You are a tank. Your job is to be the tank. You have to go in there and do tank stuff. This person is the healer. They'll stay back and they'll heal you. You can't just basically all kind of be the same thing. So we played a bit of Aliens Fireteam Elite, right? Where it's that kind of thing where you, me, and Steph were playing it, and we were all different characters, different like setups of weapons, but they all kind of just go a bit brown. Everything feels a little bit mushed together, and they're all a bit samey. Like, you can pick a shotgun or a gun, and then the aliens attack you and you fight them. I like games where they say, no, you can barely fight. You are shit at fighting. You've only got a pistol, but you can heal your team up.
And then they're like, Jonesy, just say the name of the game you're thinking of.
We all
know what you're thinking. Just say it.
No, I'm not. I'm not thinking of any game specifically at all.
You're not thinking of any role-based 4-player co-op sort of.
I'm not at all. But look, the way that those types of games have evolved over the years, right? It's been it's been good, and we've got some really nice, tight experiences out of it. And I wouldn't mind if they went down the route where they said, no, look, we're going to have a game where, the Thing is very different from the Human Torch, is very different from Reed Richards, is very different from Jessica Alba. I can't
remember their names either.
But that would be cool. But then again, like, this is the thing I get with games companies these days, is I want them to make an amazing story-based experience off of that. But the best example of that I've had, especially with Marvel characters recently, is Marvel's Avengers. And the best stuff for me in that game was the story-based stuff where you were in the more linear parts of the missions, and you were doing the single-player stuff, and you were doing what was her name? Miss Marvel's
Kamala Khan.
Kamala Khan. You were playing as Kamala Khan, and you were sort of building that character, and you were re-establishing the troop. Like, that to me was the best part of that game. When you then went out and it went, now go and do what you want and replay all the missions, that's when it got really boring. I actually enjoyed that game when it was more of a more traditional, play through the story game.
Yeah.
But do you know what? I'll give you that. If they make it a Fantastic Four game where it's more linear and I tell you what else would be super cool is if you had at the beginning. I love taking away choices from people. I like choices being more set in stone. I don't like freedom. I don't want too much freedom. If they said you will play as this character, but then if you want to change characters, you have to restart the game. Okay. I would be all about that. If they went, no, if you're the Human Torch, you are the Human Torch. And you have to get into if you have to have a group of 3 people who are then all the different characters, and you cannot change unless you start a new game, a new save, and
why
you
would
then
you
play
want
through
that?
the character.
Hang on,
I don't want choice. Because I don't want, in some games choice is great, but in every game choice isn't great. I don't want them to, if it's a linear story game, like a third person action game, I like it when they say, no, this is how you're going to play it. And I feel like that would be fun. And then it would give you an excuse to play through the game again as a different character. Whereas if you could chop and change, especially if they had different set pieces, like if you had to be Reed Richards in a specific boss fight or in a specific, I don't know, something stupid. You're tied between 2 poles and you're trying to use your belly to bounce enemies away while the thing smashes stuff. It would give you an excuse to replay the game and be like, no, this time I'm going to be the thing.
But who's going to replay a game 4 times?
If it's really good, lots of people.
I don't.
How many times do people replay friggin'?
But you're not talking about Skyrim. We're talking about.
No, I was going to say the 2B 28 the
Nier Automata. Yeah, but that was different. That was different. Like I agree with you up to a certain extent. I think a certain amount of authorship and a developer being able to say like, no, this is our vision, this is the thing you're doing, and this is the lens you're viewing this world or these characters through, and stick with that, that's absolutely fine. But to have an element of choice that then not punishes the player, but then like a choice that kind of immediately constricts around the player and doesn't let you go back on a decision you've made. Like, I don't know, I think that's unnecessarily like unhelpful. I don't know a good word for it, but unnecessarily restrictive.
Maybe, but there's a well-known sort of phenomenon which, when you give people a limited amount of choice, it's a lot better than when you give them unrestricted choice. Like the idea of going to like the restaurant that serve every type of food, it's never as good as the restaurant where they serve a limited selection, and you have to pick something that you actually like. Oh, but I think that's.
But I'm saying they don't give us as much choice, but don't have a thing where there is choice that then disappears. Like, let's go back to last year.
What if they told you right at the beginning of the game? If they said right at the beginning of the character selection?
I don't think there's value in that. Do you know the best way to approach a lack of choice in that kind of environment while still maintaining the ensemble thing, and it's something that's just occurred to me halfway through this conversation, Guardians of the Galaxy. Ensemble game, absolutely an ensemble game with terrific writing and voice acting across the board, but you only ever play as and experience the story from the perspective of one individual.
And it's a great game.
And yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy, I don't think would have been better with like a character, even if nothing changed, even if the cutscenes were identical. I don't think a character selector and being able to have more real-time active control over, say, Rocket Raccoon would have made that game better. So I think they were justifiable in restricting the amount of choice they gave the players. However,
I agree.
Like, I don't think there would be a benefit if to allowing players a choice and then locking them into that choice and saying you just played 6 hours of Star-Lord and now you want to like tinker with Drax. You're back to the beginning, baby. Like, I don't think there's value in that.
I agree, but I think that's because those games are very different in the sense of those games. Guardians of the Galaxy is very different in the sense of it is a single player game where you are controlling the other characters, but from the viewpoint of obviously Star-Lord. I don't think they would do that with this. They're gonna make, because this is the thing these days, everything has to be multiplayer. So they want other people to sort of play as those other characters, I'm sure. So then they've got more maybe liberty to have them branch off and characters to go off and experience things that only, because so this is my problem with Marvel's Avengers. When you give someone the ability to be any character, the environments you go through have to cater for every character. So they have to cater for the flying characters, the swinging characters, the jumping characters, the running characters. So you end up with like this bland level design because you have to cater for all of those. I hope that someone like Amy Hennig at the helm, that they would be able to say, no, this is a section, this is a level or part of a level that only the Thing can do because he's going to go through and smash stuff. But that only works if the only person who can go through that area of that level is the Thing. Or the Human Torch. You can only have flying sections of that of a part of a Fantastic Four level, when the Human Torch can fly through them, you couldn't then have Jessica Alba going through that same area.
We should
because
find
you
out
then
what she's called. Is she
should.
Mrs. Fantastic?
She is, yeah. She's Reed Richards' wife, so she's something Richards.
But she also has another name. Is that the thing?
What is her super name? Yeah,
Susan Storm.
So that sounds about right.
Susan Storm must be a human name because this also lists the Thing as Ben Grimm.
That's right. Yeah. So does she have a? What is her superhero name? Does it say? Or is it Susan Storm? That's a pretty super name.
I'm falling down a weird rabbit hole where now, like, I'm looking at Jessica Alba's Wikipedia rather than Susan Storm, aka the Invisible Woman.
Oh, okay. Oh, there you go. Yeah, so like, that's right. So
she became, when she got married to him, she became Susan Storm Richards. That's
right.
So they went the double barrel route.
Like, yeah, that to me is one of the hard. Must be really difficult when you're designing a video game. Is if you're trying to cater for every type of character in every environment. That's why I quite like take away that choice, give the designers an ability to say, no, this section of this area of this level is built specifically for this type of character.
Yeah.
But then it's so goddamn hard, right? I don't know how they would pull that off.
Totally. To the point where if you offered me a choice, I would say, can I not make a Fantastic Four game? Could I just pick another great character?
I hadn't heard it's Fantastic Four game.
It's not confirmed.
It's that rumor.
It's a rumor. Well, actually, the leading rumor I think at one point in time was Ant-Man for some reason, and then Marvel have recently taken, or Disney rather, have recently taken to referring to it as a Marvel Ensemble game, and then they looked at, I think it was something to do with the people who it looks like are working on it and what they've written in the past in terms of comic book wise, and it's the a lot of the crosshairs are lining up on the Fantastic Four, but it's complete rumor and speculation at this point, which you could make this entire discussion redundant in just a few short weeks.
But you've actually hit on something that really annoyed me about the Marvel's Avengers game, which was I think they missed a massive opportunity for cooperative play. And Ant-Man is a perfect example, because if you watch the Ant-Man films, when it's Ant-Man and the Wasp, them together are a much more powerful duo than they are separately, because Ant-Man or the Wasp can, like, she picks up Ant-Man and she flies in places and she, like, drops him so he can get to different areas. And one thing I thought would be really cool when it came to the Marvel's Avengers game was that rather than you being able to get around the environment on your own, if you actually needed to utilize the other Avengers to help you move around. So you would have to have Thor would have to pick up Black Widow and fly her places. Otherwise, and I think that sort of cooperative play is something that was missing from Marvel's Avengers. And that gets over the problem, like I was saying, if Susan Storm's rubbish because all she does is turn invisible and the Human Torch can fly. If the Human Torch has to pick her up, or if Reed Richards has to launch her across a gap. And that's something, again, which Guardians of the Galaxy, like, this isn't a pro Guardians of the Galaxy only podcast, but Guardians of the Galaxy did very well because it actually had sections of that game where Groot could go and do something easily. Like, he could have done it himself, but he had a problem that everyone had to get over. And so you had to find ways of not only getting over one character, you had to then get over all of your team, which has actually made the game feel much more authentic.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's the route they go down, rather than Marvel's Avengers sort of open world, just everything's brown and a pancake world.
That would be very disappointing. And I guess one thing that is nice, although, you know, hindsight sometimes means a lot and sometimes means very little in the games industry, but hopefully, as you kind of hinted at there's some hindsight at play with the direction Skylance New Media go with this, in so much as you've got case studies like Marvel's Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy to look at to inspire a certain direction. Although I think you were actually circling around the best possible idea, and the idea that I would pitch now if I had to go into a meeting with Marvel. You basically said it yourself, though. It's Ant-Man and the Wasp in a Marvelized version of It Takes Two.
Do you know what's funny? I literally thought It Takes Two. As I was saying it, I was like, that is It Takes Two. But that game was so good. Like, an Ant-Man and the Wasp, they have that cooperative play already in the movies. And that would be so much more fun as a game, because you're a duo, you've got to work together. You can't just do everything on your own. Yeah, no, I'd be totally up for that. Get what's his name, Joseph Barris on the line. Get him a couple of grams. Tell him to come down.
Exactly. No, how about if you don't even get Joseph Farris involved in the writing, just bring back the Book of Love character for no apparent reason.
Hey, Ant-Man and the Wasp, you're falling out. We need to get you back together, baby.
I've never seen Ant-Man and the Wasp, but I presume that's what that film is about, and the upcoming sequel.
It is. That is all it is about. They fall out of love and they shrink. I mean, it is basically It Takes Two.
Yeah.
Come on. Yeah. And there are bugs. There are wasps. There are even wasps and bees and stuff in It Takes Two. So I mean, look, it writes itself. Come on now.
It does. Although before they get to that, Marvel might have to consider whether that would be stepping on the toes of EA, who, like I said, they don't have an exclusivity deal with anymore when it comes to other Disney properties like Star Wars, but they are more than just a little bit still working with. And that's where we get Jonesy into the kind of the other side of what Disney have going on. And I want to say that essentially all of these have an asterisk next to them when it comes to whether or not they would appear at this digital event, largely because of who's making them and who's publishing them and which stages of development they're at. But these are all still technically Disney games in one form or another. So starting with EA, we have Star Wars Jedi Survivor, of course, the sequel to Jedi Fallen Order that I think is still set for a release date. Is it early-ish next year, like first half of next year? I can't actually remember now.
I can't remember either. I'll very quickly see if I can double check and find out.
Yeah, that's one that I feel like we'll be seeing something from probably at some point by the end of the year. I don't know. EA obviously haven't had anything in terms of there wasn't an EA Play this summer, and this game got announced as part of the Star Wars celebration. But I know that EA are going to do kind of smaller events for one-off things and to show off games when they need to be shown off. Like I believe at the time of recording, it currently sounds like there's going to be some kind of Dead Space preview event next month.
It's Jan to March next year for Jedi Survivor, which is surprising because obviously we only saw that the trailer for it, the cinematic trailer, not too long ago.
Right.
It's something we've heard about for a little while. We found out the name, and then it's like you get the trailer, and it's pretty soon, man. It's January to March, which is not long at all.
And like Dead Space is January, and that's getting its gameplay preview rounds next month, which makes you think that it's not impossible for Jedi Survivor to pop up somewhere, either in its own right as we head towards the end of the year, or perhaps it will piggyback onto one of the other things that's going on, like this Disney event, or it's maybe a little bit too premature for Gamescom, which is happening next week at the time of recording. But then, of course, you have the Game Awards themselves at the end of last year, at the end of the year, which actually have been no stranger to Star Wars games recently, because Star Wars Eclipse, the Quantic Dream Star Wars game, was of course announced at Keighley's event last year, although that one, it still seems like it's many, many years away, as the sort of entirely cinematic trailer would have suggested. Also probably many, many years away is a Star Wars FPS being developed by Respawn. I wouldn't be surprised, Jonesy, between you and me, if we saw something Respawn-related show up in the next 12 months outside of Apex Legends. The issue is, I think they've got about at least 3 games in development across that studio right now, and I don't know which is furthest ahead, to put it bluntly.
That's the one that I think holds the most promise. Like Jedi Survivor is going to be really good. I just think that's, the first game is fantastic. I think this is going to be really good. But the idea of Respawn making an FPS Star Wars game, and then you think about their pedigree, and you're like, that game could be something really special. Like it's going to be good. I think no matter what, it's going to be enjoyable. Star Wars fans are going to like it. But then you sort of think, okay, they could make something really, really special, which is so one that I'm definitely holding out hopes that we see something sooner rather than later for that.
Yes, agreed. Although again, we don't know at this stage, and with EA being in that weird middle ground, like other places like PlayStation are at, you just don't know what you're going to see and when you're going to see it. Speaking of PlayStation, that means the same thing's going for Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine, both of which were announced at the September PlayStation Showcase this time last year, neither of which has been seen since, but of course, both being developed by Insomniac, so one would imagine that Spider-Man 2 is not only coming first, but will be the one of those two that we see next. There's also one more Star Wars game over at Ubisoft, and that is being developed by Ubisoft Massive. We don't know anything about that, and that is probably because Ubisoft Massive still have their hands tied with the recently delayed Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, which, for those of you who have lost track at this point, is in fact technically a Disney game. Again, thanks to the nature of acquisitions and parent companies and subsidiaries and so on and so forth. We have the aforementioned titles such as Marvel's Midnight Suns and the Skydance new media Marvel game with Amy Hennig. We have a couple of little rogue things in the middle, like Machine Games, of course, working on an Indiana Jones project as part of the kind of the reforming of Lucas and so on and so forth. We don't know much about that yet. Kingdom Hearts 4, a Disney kind of adjacent property that will be a big deal when Square Enix wrap their head around that. And finally, I've left this to the end because it is, of course, just a rumour, and one that we discussed on this very podcast just a few weeks ago, and that is the potential for a Black Panther game being worked on at EA by the folks who, or at least the folk who made the Middle-earth games, the recent open-world Middle-earth games. There's a lot there, Jonesy. Most of it I'd be surprised if we saw in September. But do you think there's anything that stands out there as something that either A, has to be further along than meets the eye, or B, is ready for a little bit more of a reveal? Kind of like how we hinted at with Jedi Survivor, how actually you look at the release date, you look at development time, we're going to be seeing something about this soon. Is there anything else there that leaps off the page as something that you want to see more of?
So Indiana Jones, I think, is what is an easy one for me. Is the one that I want to see, because when they sort of announced it, it was one where you immediately jumped to, okay, Uncharted was an Indiana Jones game with a different character, and then you think like, okay, what does a modern day Indiana Jones game look like? And it just excites the hell out of me. I'm like, that could be. It's obviously it's from the pedigree of like, it's even like talk about Tomb Raider. All of these things feel like they were born of Indiana Jones, and then it's like, and Indiana Jones used to have games, obviously, but they were from like a very different era. They were like the point and click era. They were a very different type of feel to them. So I'm so excited about seeing what they actually do with that. You look unsure.
I want to ask you a question as a hardcore indie fan, but mixed with the pedigree of Machine Games and their history at Starbreeze as well. Would it have any impact at all on your excitement for the Indiana Jones game if you found out it was first person?
Yeah, I wouldn't like it.
Interesting. I thought that'd be your answer.
No, I wouldn't like it at all, because I just don't see. For me, there are like, I suppose that when you come to like an IP, there are fundamentals that you need to include in the IP.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, fundamental to the IP of Indiana Jones, and it comes straight, and you can see it if you haven't even seen the Indiana Jones. If you've played Tomb Raider games, if you've played Uncharted games, it's sort of like a lot of mystery, a lot of like ancient artifacts and stuff, and then there's explosive action tied into it. And the combat side of it, that FPS games are the best at, is always a lesser part of it. Indiana Jones does not run around shooting people, like that's not his main aim, which is what FPS is obviously best at. He fights people, he runs away, he uses his whip, he does a lot of things that a third person action game are beautiful at. Having a first person elements to it, or having like a way you can, aim down sights or something if you wanted to go that route, I could see them doing that. But there's even jokes in Indiana Jones about like the fact that he doesn't have a gun. In what is it? Which one is it where he like goes to pull his gun out and it's like a flashback joke, and then he's got his gun's not in his holster. I think it's Temple of Doom. I might be wrong. I can't remember. But yeah, I feel like you wouldn't get the game you deserve if it's pure first person. That would.
Do you know what?
Yeah.
I kind of brought it up in a silly kind of like Cyberpunk 2077. Oh, I want to see my person kind of way. But your arguments are actually extremely valid.
I just don't. I think it's a different game. Don't get me wrong. It might still be very, very good, but I think it's just a different game to what Indiana Jones fans like me. That was weird because that's my name, Jones. It sounds weird to say that. Indiana Jones games like me, like that I like. Jesus Christ, the films that I like, I don't think would be accurately represented in a first-person game. I'd see how Indiana Jones has affected my life because my surname is Jones. My brother actually called his dog Indiana because obviously the joke is that Indiana Jones, his name's not actually Indiana. His name is Henry Jones Jr. and the dog is called Indiana.
Yeah.
They call the dog Indiana. And my brother has a dog called Indiana.
There you go. Nice.
But no, so yeah, Indiana Jones is an easy one for me. I think I'm actually more excited about the individual hero games from the Marvel pedigree. So like Black Panther, Wolverine, like we've seen how good Spider-Man is as a game. And for me, it's because you get to build a game with an engine that works for the mechanics of a single character. And that's what is good. Like Spider-Man, running around on the streets as Spider-Man is not great. Swinging is incredible.
Yes.
That game is built to swing. Hey. If you build a Wolverine game, you can build a game where stabbing people with your adamantium claws feels badass. You can have like a free flow combat system like the Batman era games whereby, it just feels good to fight. Similar with Black Panther, like I think that is a game that really needs its own dedicated set of, I'm not a game designer, obviously, but engine laws, and this is how the engine runs, and this is how the game feels. Like, I think that's where games like that really take off. So I'm really excited about those. The Wolverine, Spider-Man 2, Black Panther, I think those sound wicked. Avatar, I mean, I could have left that back when they first announced it, man. Jesus Christ. And all the other, as for the others, like I said, Star Wars Respawn is one that I'm super excited about because they make such good damn games. Like first-person games, they make incredible games. So
yeah,
I don't even play much Apex. Like I haven't played Apex for ages, but just look at like Titanfall and Titanfall 2 and how good those games are and how fun they are to play.
Like, in Titanfall 2, in spite of the fact that it's, not getting any younger, they still made, one of the best examples of that kind of like tentpole Q4 FPS game in the Call of Duty vein, in that Call of Duty model. But like, this is how you make an FPS campaign. This is how you integrate FPS multiplayer. And even some of the things that were wrong with the first Titanfall, like the lack of progression in the multiplayer, the lack of customization that derived from that progression in the multiplayer, they kind of improved on everything that they needed improving upon. And like, again, you look at how they adapted to Jedi Fallen Order and like their first attempt at something like that, and you're like, yeah, these guys have clearly got a knack. And that was exactly what I was thinking when, like, Spider-Man 2 is something of a known quantity at this stage. Obviously, they could mix things up, and I'm sure they will mix things up. But Wolverine, you look at as another Insomniac project, and, like, how much credit you have to give Insomniac that they've gotten to the point now where they are just as much of an exciting factor of a game's pre-release build-up, pre-release hype. And you're just like...
Yeah, they're absolutely fair. They are amazing.
Yeah, like the visuals and the feel of both Spider-Man games that we've had thus far and the most recent Ratchet and Clanks was so good that you just like, that, like, going back to what you said, like, that Wolverine fucking someone up with his claws will feel and look amazing, and you just want to. That's something you just want to see right now, like that.
But what doesn't make sense to me with a company like Insomniac is, do you remember the time when it was like they had Miles Morales was obviously, I think, had come out. Ratchet and Clank we'd seen, and they'd already started talking about Spider-Man 2. And you're like, how the fuck are they making these games this well, this quickly? Like, this doesn't seem possible.
Yeah. No, at a time when no one else seemed to be doing it. And like on a brand new piece of hardware that no one else was exploiting in the way they were. And like, I still maintain that Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is just, like, if you're buying a PS5 now and you want to see a game that looks and like just draws the maximum amount of energy and power of that PS5 and kind of is the perfect example of everything that console's capable at the moment, I still think that Ratchet and Clank game is one of the best examples of it. Like, there are obviously other really good looking games that are out there at the moment, but like as a next gen only, like, hey, fucking look at this thing. It's super impressive. And yeah, the fact that they would be able to do that alongside getting Spider-Man Miles Morales ready for launch and having, 2 more Marvel games in the hopper, like, super impressive. And it's cool that we can talk about all these Disney properties, and as a result of Disney's slightly more far-reaching video game endeavors nowadays, we do have companies like Insomniac and like Respawn and like Machine Games on the hook for some of this stuff. And we'll see.
What is if you had to pick one of those to say like that's the one you are most excited about hearing more about? What would you go for? Do you think?
It might be Wolverine, just because. Look, I've just waxed lyrical about Insomniac. I'm not going to try and pretend that's not a huge factor for me. The Star Wars stuff, it all feels somewhat familiar. I'm not that enthusiastic about where Star Wars is right now as a property. Let alone, any individual video game. And I think when it comes to the one factor that could sway me, the Respawn factor, Respawn have other things that they're working on that I'm more excited about than this. and so it would be strange. The same. You're going to crucify me for this, but the same would be said for Indiana Jones, in so much as that, like, if you offered me right now, if you asked me which one I'd like to come out first, I wouldn't cancel either of them. Which one I'd like to come out first, Indiana Jones or a Wolfenstein 3, I'd pick Wolfenstein. Because that's the series I know more, and that's the story I want a resolution to, and that's the world I want more from. And Indiana Jones, like a lot of teams out there could make an a great Indiana Jones game. Why are you delaying my Wolfenstein for it? That's the part of what selfishly I think.
I will give you that. It does feel like a slight odd departure for Machine Games, and I can see, and there's a weird thing of that, because I'm not this is going to sound harsh. I like Wolfenstein. I haven't fallen in love with the series for a few different reasons. Yeah. Like there's I have some issues with some of their level design and some of how the games play and things. I still think they're a very good company. They make very good games, and I think they make games that really do play to like what fans want. And so what's funny is I would probably agree with you that a Wolfenstein 3 is more likely to be a very good game, even with my reservations around Wolfenstein games. Because some of the things that I haven't liked, I think are quite easily fixable. And the prospect of an Indiana Jones game is almost like they could just phone it in because of the IP. I'm not saying they would, but I think they could, and you could still end up with a saleable property that people buy, and you kind of go, yeah, that was all right. I don't want to be harsh, but that's probably what Hogwarts Legacy will feel like. A game that sort of capitalized on what it was and phoned it in a little bit and wasn't quite to the level that a lot of people are hoping. I hope that's not true. I'm not saying it's going to be true, but I'm saying that is a definite possibility. Sometimes that happens with games that tie into like movies and TV shows and other things. But there is a chance that they make such a sick Indiana Jones game that I'm well in the mood for. Like the second that you see like gameplay and Indy's hat is like falls down under a thing, and then he pulls it out from under a rock that's like closing down on his hand, and I'll be like, oh my god, I want to play this game. Like, so yeah. But I know I kind of agree with you in a weird way. Like, I'm not mad at you for that at all. I'm not mad at you. It makes sense.
No. Also, like when it comes to a question like that, there's no wrong answers, right? About like, kind of, I'm looking forward to each of these games in some way, shape, or form, and even if it's sort of like a weird, morbid curiosity,
except for Kingdom Hearts 4.
I said morbid curiosity.
Right.
Yeah, Kingdom Hearts is a weird outlier. Like again, I call it Disney adjacent. That's how I feel about it, and I don't know. But there are a lot of people out there who really like Kingdom Hearts, Jonesy, and it's our job as smiling faces on the front lines of video games to keep promoting and supporting the development of hot new projects that people like.
It's weird. Kingdom Hearts is weird for me because I've played a bit of it. I played a bit of Kingdom Hearts 3, sorry, and it was when the Spider-Man was in.
It was at Gamescom.
Was that where we played Spider-Man as well? Was that E3? That was
Gamescom as well.
So, what was weird about that was the queues to play Spider-Man were massive. Like everyone wanted to play that. And Kingdom Hearts 3, there was nobody there. And we were on the press day. We weren't on the public day, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I remember when you said, what were you playing? And I was like, I was just playing some Kingdom Hearts 3. And you were like, what? No, you weren't. And I was like, oh, yeah, I was. It's just over there. And you were like, what? And then there was no one there. And I think you were genuinely surprised.
Because in my head, it was like, what are the chances that a kiosk to play what was then a highly anticipated game that I don't even think was coming out that year at that point, or if it was.
I think you're right. I don't think it was.
It was slightly further away, and I was like, surely that, like, again, like if the queue on the press day for Spider-Man was a couple of hours, then Kingdom Hearts. I'm not suggesting it would be in the same spot, but I didn't think you'd just be able to walk up to it and be like, oh, what's this? Oh, it's Kingdom Hearts. Cool.
Just wander over and be like, oh, this plays me. There's nothing else to do. Just plays me Kingdom Hearts 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was funny.
It was funny. And maybe that's what we learned, is that Kingdom Hearts fans are real. They don't come out in public and they don't go to conventions.
They don't work for the games press because that's who was
it's
there.
True,
on that
actually.
Day.
If it was a public day, that would have been
sure
a very
the queue
different
was mad on the public day. Yeah.
God, I know the temperatures have calmed down a little bit across Europe now, but heaven help anyone going to Gamescom this year, because those public days there's something else. Yeah. I'm getting flashbacks now. PTSD, the of climbing onto escalators and people who clearly haven't been introduced to the concept of deodorant. But anyway, we're not going this year. Do you know who is?
No. Who's going?
Jeff Keighley. Jeff Keighley's going.
Of course.
And he's, of course, bringing back one of the things that we were actually... And actually, it wasn't the time that you were there, Josie. I think it was the year after. But something that All-Time Gaming, us and our previous forms, were there for the first ever time it happened. And that's opening night live. And Jeff Keighley's returning with it in public, another in-person event. So people actually... in the crowds this time, live reactions, which I'm sure will result in kind of, if it's anything like the Game Awards, just a weird sort of slightly alarming lack of applause and lack of cheering at points where you think there should be lots of big cheering and big pops. I only bring this up because talk about Disney having its digital showcase in September, of course Ubisoft having a showcase in September, so I'm bringing up Gamescom just to kind of wrap up the fact that, like, hey, as we kind of hinted at last week, over the next month, there's quite a lot happening. Sonic Frontiers is going to be there, Hogwarts Legacy, the Callisto Protocol, High on Life, Return to Monkey Island. There's going to be a bunch of new stuff. Jeff Keighley referring to all of those lovingly as world premiere new looks. Sometimes I feel like Jeff has a slightly different definition of world premiere to other people, which can lead to confusion. Did lead to confusion on a podcast I watched this week where he said, yeah, we've got 30 world premieres. And the host were like, 30 world premieres? Like new games? He's like, no, like 30 things you've never seen before.
And they're also a little bit tricksy because I swear the last time I watched something, I can't remember what even would have been. It might have actually been the opening night of Summer Game Fest, and they were like premiere, and it was just the same trailer we'd already seen, but it had some additional shots.
Oh, it was the Callisto Protocol. They did like the extended edition of the Callisto Protocol trailer, but then they did show gameplay afterwards.
So then it was like, oh, okay, so technically you're right, it's premiere of like the new stuff, but it felt a little bit like that's not the best description because I've seen a lot of this stuff before. But I suppose it's fair because obviously the gameplay stuff we hadn't seen before. I'm not that. I'm not that taken with this list. I must admit, that's probably more of a me thing. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are excited about this, especially like Return to Monkey Island, whatever. But I don't know. Sonic Frontiers has had a really ropey start because it looks terrible. Hogwarts Legacy should be out soon, and it's obviously just been pushed. So it's cool that it's there, but like I said, and they had a 15-minute gameplay reveal thing back a couple of months ago.
They had a whole state of play, right?
Yeah, they had a whole thing dedicated to it, and it looked like I was saying before. I don't want to have a go at Hogwarts Legacy. It's a game that I'm excited to play. My wife's massively into like what's his name? Harry Potter. She likes Harry Potter and the whole sort of like Hogwarts thing, and it looks like a well-made game. It looks very nice, but like I said, I do think there's a possibility that they've kind of made a very pretty game, which isn't necessarily going to be a game that plays as well as it looks. I think it's the best way I can put it. I think that's fair.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
And then the Callisto Protocol we've seen loads for. I hope you're right. Then I really hope you're right because I keep seeing things about it, and the way they talk about it and the trailers and stuff make it look wicked. And I'm, even as not much of a Harry Potter fan, I'm excited to play it.
Same.
But at the same time, I just kind of I don't know.
Yeah,
there's a weird forespokenness about it.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah,
like it looks very nice.
Do you reckon?
How will it play?
Do you reckon we see Forspoken at Gamescom?
No.
With a 16:9 version of that trailer from last week?
Maybe. Oh, no. I was going to say, we've only just like had a bit more like why. And they've just been slated so hard. Like, actually, maybe they will. Like, I don't know.
Because I'm looking at this list, and particularly Hogwarts Legacy, which, of course, as you mentioned, got delayed. High on Life, that actually got delayed this afternoon. At the time of recording,
wow, okay, I didn't know.
But staying this year, it got delayed by 6 weeks, so now it's coming out in December. Do
you find it? I find it weird. Let me ask you this question quickly before we move on. Do you find it weird when a game is delayed and then you get like trailers and stuff for it at like a games conference or whatever?
I was actually gonna say that's why I think there could be some Forspoken coverage at this, because I think it's like a weird double whammy of a lot of the games that are getting delayed and the amount they're being delayed by is like, actually, we just need extra time to polish. Like, things are in a good place. We need time. Like, you know, we don't know when Hogwarts Legacy was going to come out. It never had a firm release date in Q4. But by moving to February, it's bought itself no more than 3 or 4 months. High on Life, we're talking about 6 weeks. Forspoken is a weird one because that's been delayed a few times now. But clearly, like, people have played Forspoken. It was the Game Informer cover article, and they had gameplay videos of it throughout the whole month of, you know, whatever it was, May, June, something like that. And so there is an idea here in my mind of like, these are all games that can be shown, and it's just about sort of like keeping them stuck within the public consciousness, and also reinforcing that new release date that kind of makes these things make sense.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I have weird takes. We know this. Hot takes, trash opinions. That's the name of the game. I always have a feeling when it comes to this sort of thing, like if a game's just been delayed and then they show you a trailer or they have coverage about it, it almost feels like I'm sitting at a restaurant. I've ordered my food. It always takes about half an hour, or usually takes about half an hour to get your food. So you kind of, you're expecting it. And then after half an hour, or let's say 25 minutes, let's be fair, the waitress comes over, or the waiter comes over, and they say, "Oh, sorry, but your meal is delayed, unfortunately, so you're going to have to wait another 20 minutes. And you're like, oh, okay, no, yeah, that sucks. But hey, I've eaten here before and the food's often good, so that's okay. And the waiter goes, but that steak is mighty juicy. And those chips, they've been fried just right. Also, we've got so many sauces. You're going to have a hell of a time when you get that food. And I'm like, dude, you've just told me it's delayed. Don't now try and like piss me off by telling me how good it is. Because now let me get over the fact I'm annoyed at the delay. Well, then I'll be ready to appreciate how tasty it's going to be when it's here again. I need a bit more breathing space to get over the initial delay.
Do you know what? In that case, I think you do need a bit more breathing space. I think the difference is when it comes to the way the games industry functions is that the overwhelming majority of the people, 98% of the people that this waiter is communicating with in this sense, haven't ordered the steak yet. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, okay.
So they're like, the steak is going to take 20 minutes longer. You know, it says on the menu that there's a waiting time of an hour on the steak. That waiting time is now 90 minutes, but we still thoroughly recommend you order it.
Okay, or maybe they're even walking outside and they're walking past and they're like, oh, the table's a little bit longer than we thought, but you can wait in the queue and then you'll get okay. Maybe.
Exactly. And while you're here in the queue, here's a sampler. Like here's a 1 by 1 inch cube of steak on a toothpick.
In the incredibly unlikely eventuality that God of War Ragnarok gets delayed, if they do delay it and then they drop a trailer, I will ask you how you're feeling and whether or not.
No, because I feel like how you did in the restaurant because I've ordered the steak, Jonesy.
That's what I wonder. I'll be saying, like, Jamie, do you feel satisfied by the lovely little trailer that you've got now that you have to wait an extra 12 weeks to play God of War Ragnarok?
The satisfaction would be the furthest word from my mind, I think, at that point in time. But I agree with you, and I think one thing that is a bit of a shame, going back to sort of looking at Gamescom as a whole, is that there are a couple of things we're going to talk about in a moment that have now been all but confirmed as a result of leaks on various retailers that suggested... I'll put it this way, I'll jump in a little bit and say some of the games we're going to talk about later on I think would have been Gamescom announcements, and had they been preserved up until next Tuesday, they would have been pretty cool. And it's a shame they're not going to be as cool as a result, but if there are a handful more things like that, then that would be great. But all in all, it is an okay time. Like I'm curious to see what the Disney showcase has to offer. And I also think that Ubisoft are in an interesting position. Ubisoft have the state problem themselves with Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, which is kind of like we know we've just delayed this game, but we promise it still exists, and here it is. Please don't forget about us. And also,
do you know what I just realised?
Sorry.
I just realised in the restaurant analogy about telling about the steak not coming out, Ubisoft is the waiter or the waitress who brings your food out, puts it on another table over there, doesn't tell you that they've put it out, and then just like carries on around their business. And then after 10 minutes, you say, "Sorry, I was just waiting for that really tasty that steak burger and fries. Is that?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, I've put it on that table." And you go, "I didn't even know it came out. It looks good. What, can I have it?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, sure. Didn't know you'd want it over here." You're like,
Yeah,
The fuck,
we
man?
left it
What's
there.
with
No,
you?
no one's been touching it. Actually,
What's with you?
you can have it, but you've only got like 30 seconds to eat it because we got told to take it back to the kitchen. Like
No
no
one's
one was
eating
eating it, so we got told
So
to
we're
take it
taking
away. Yeah, exactly. It's like,
Like, for God's sake, stop
I
doing
want-
this to me, Ubisoft.
and you're like, okay, well, even if I can't enjoy that, at least I can enjoy the chicken sandwich. I get the chicken sandwich every time I come, same time, same place, like same day in the calendar. I get the chicken sandwich. Anthony said the chicken sandwich is working a little bit different this time. We bring out just the buns on their own, and we're going to bring out an assortment of meats and allow you to create your own sandwich over the course of the next 7 years.
You're like, I don't want that. Just bring me the chicken sandwich.
The chicken sandwich. The last chicken. I bought more of the last chicken sandwich than I ever bought of any chicken sandwich before that. Yeah, but so we're changing the chicken sandwich. I'm sorry.
What we've actually done is there's a table you can now go to, and then you can sit at that table, and then you can leave and go to other tables. Just to experience that food on the other table.
Just
and then
to
go back
let
to
you know,
that table.
we've actually tweaked your favourite chicken sandwich just a little bit. First of all, it is completely free. That's the good news. I will have to inform you, though, that it is A, no longer a sandwich, and B, no longer chicken. But it is free.
Oh, do you know what? We need to make a sketch out of this. It needs to be like a sketch about a restaurant where it's all the different waiters are the different games companies. And
I think
how they go about.
Yeah, I think you could go around a whole bunch of different industries and would just like, if like video game practices apply to other industries.
Embracer are the one at the back where they're going, would you like anything off the menu? Like, oh yeah, I'll have that please. And, oh sorry, I can't do it anymore. That waiter's he's got it. He's the only one who can sell that now.
Yeah.
Can I have this?
Like,
oh no, he's just got that as well. Sorry about that.
It's a construction company, and you and your next door neighbour are both getting a conservatory built at the same time. And you wake up and one day you call the head of operations at the construction company. And you're like, so I'm just looking out my window. The neighbour's conservatory that's being built, the exact same dimensions, specifications, and time as mine. They're building it twice as fast. Yeah, they just purchased a booster. Sorry, what? Yeah, we work twice as fast. We work twice as fast for the next 3 hours.
Do you want to buy the booster as well?
Yeah, exactly.
No, thanks.
You get the booster for free if you buy this, whatever the construction equivalent of the season passes.
Oh man,
yeah, video games, huh? Lots to look forward to.
Crazy world out there
in the coming months. You know what's crazy? Life, and the fact that people in the course of their lives have chosen to support us, and their avenue of support that so many of them have graciously chosen is Patreon, and the link that you can head to join them is patreon.com/SuperShow. What you'll find when you head over there is a platform where you can choose a level of donation, a level of monthly donation that feels appropriate both for you and the level of quality entertainment and products that we provide you. There's a $2 tier, there's a $5 tier, there's a $10 tier, and each of them has associated perks and benefits like access to a Discord server that we hang out on with the rest of our community, like Patreon exclusive content, Patreon exclusive podcasts, behind the scenes videos, Let's Plays, all sorts of things that live in there, the catalogue, the back catalogue, the library of content that we've got that lives behind the Patreon paywall grows with each passing month. So there's never been a better time than the furthest forward day that you're living, which at the time you're listening to this is right now, to support us on Patreon. That link once again is patreon.com/SuperShow, and I'd like to acknowledge some of the very kind people who have already gone over there and seen fit to pledge to our cause and help us keep producing that content. There are some names on screen now that I wish to celebrate, and I'd also like to draw attention to some names, some further individuals who are doing God's work and helping us, and they are Aaron Cameron, Athletic Gravy, Bill Caesar, Brimstone, Cole K, Ice Nort Rock Salt, Jesper Camdell Nielsen, Leo Merger, Mindful Pigs, Mr. Anthropic, Nathan Pierce, Pastors Guild, and the head honchos, the real board of directors above the board of directors, Brett Z, aka Shell Shock, Doppler, Geometric Potter, Hacksaw Book Read, Manuel Guerrero, Peaswad. Thank you all so much, you lovely group of individuals.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Jonesy, speaking of patrons, one of the board of directors, so I will warn you now, one of our bosses, one of the people that controls our destiny, our fates, our future employment, actually left a comment on a recent video of ours that you have picked out as comment of the week. It's Shell Shock. Shall I read it?
Go for it, mate.
He said, "Woo! Feels great to be caught up again. Great show as always, lads. Had a random thought. Wonder what your top 5 games that wouldn't be on anyone else's top 5 list would be. So like games you really, really love, but the consensus was less forgiving." And this, like, admittedly, I will say that this is one that we haven't prepared for, because this was picked out as comment of the week just prior to recording, so we don't have a laundry list of research titles to hand. But it's a great question. Like, it's the kind of thing that if we were still in ATG territory and we found the right way to kind of title and thumbnail this, because it's a bit of a weird kind of conceptual one, I would love to do a kind of video like this. But where Jonesy, if I start with you, if you don't mind, where does your mind kind of immediately go to? Because I feel like you are uniquely positioned to have a shitload of stuff that no one else likes and you do.
Do you know what? It's funny. So I picked out this comment, and I thought it was a really good question. And there was 2 games that immediately jumped to mind. Do you know what I should have done? Is I should have then spent some time maybe listing down a few more, but I'm on the fly. So I'll give you a couple that jumped to mind. So we've already mentioned it. Evolve is one of the games that I loved. I thought was fantastic. That asymmetric style, the team of hunters versus the monster thing. I thought that game was very good. I don't know what it was specifically about it that I really liked. I think it was because I had some of those crazy moments in games that you can't really, you can never forget. You just have such a good time, and you can remember them for years after. And I know that kind of sounds weird, right? A game like Evolve, you're like, well, how can you have these crazy cool times? Because it's a multiplayer game, so you're sharing moments with other people. We had some, I just remember things like drop in the dome to contain the monster, and it was like right at the perfect second, and then you see the monster like slam into the side of the wall as it was trying to escape, and then just stop and turn around because the player was just pissed off at the fact that you'd managed to catch them. And then all hell breaks loose, because then the monster goes mental and starts attacking all of the people, and then the people are going crazy and they're trying to tether the monster, fight it, heal up, and all this. It's just a very cool, very nice asymmetric hunting game with a sort of a I suppose the pacing of it as well was something that I really enjoyed. If you were the monster in that game, you spent, the first, say, 2/3 trying to escape, trying to level up, trying to get more powerful. And it was a constant thing about running away and hiding. And then the switch happened, is when you suddenly were max level and you were OP as fuck. And you then turned around. That is that you had that Predator moment when you're like, okay, let's fucking do this. And you then went and hunted.
Becomes the hunter.
Exactly. And you suddenly turn around and go, right, no, this is the moment I'm going to mess these boys up. And you go and you attack them. And I had some really nice moments like that. Another one I would go for would probably be Rune, which I've talked about on the podcast before as well, which is, I think it's like early 90s, Rune is. But it was my first sort of introduction to, and to be fair, I don't think people would say it was bad, but I don't think many people would even remember it to maybe say it was good, like, top 5 games that you might not, other people would say game. But it was effectively, you start off as a Viking kid and you work your way up, and you grow up through the course of the game, and you end up and you get new equipment, and you end up as this hard as nails Viking warrior by the end. And it was my first introduction to kind of that sort of RPG style, living through the game and getting more and more hardcore, which I loved. And it was because it was the visual side of like leveling up, it was the stat side of leveling up. And some games, I don't like it when you level up a piece of gear, but it looks the same. I want the visual hook as well, but I also don't like leveling up gear whereby you put on something that looks better, but the stats don't change, because I'm like, why do I look like I'm wearing a massive armored shield, but it doesn't protect me? Like, that to me is dumb. I want it to look good and to work well. And Rune kind of had that, like you could literally pick up shields and weapons are on the floor, and they'd, start off with a wooden shield, end up with like something made of steel, and it was just much better. I'm struggling now. What have you? So, Jamie, give me a couple that you've got.
I was just rattling around online for a second there, just to kind of get some prompts and some inspiration, because I can't find anything that's particularly recent. For some reason, if I go back to kind of like my teens and that time where, like, when I was just playing anything and everything, and I was far more easily enamored with games that weren't actually doing anything interesting, there's a laundry list of titles that I can mention, but recently it's tough. I remember one thing that kind of creeps to mind, even though my opinion on it has softened over the years, and I acknowledge it's really probably not as good as I hoped it would be, was The Order 1886, which was a game that I was and this was a big part of it. Make no mistake, I was excited for. I bought day one at full price, and I was like, "This is going to be my jam." This is first party Sony. This is a big, expensive project, and I remember thinking that the story was better than people made it out to be, and I didn't think it was as big a deal that it was a fairly by the numbers third person cover shooter outside of that story. And I remember not even being that bothered by the length. I haven't, not without going back and playing it, I have kind of, as I said, softened on that stance over the years, and I think, as listeners to this podcast will know, I don't champion that game or anything like that. But that was certainly one at the time where I was like, people are being nitpicky and being harsh for no reason, and this is actually a good game, when the reality is I don't think it's particularly good. A lot of the other stuff, though, kind of, it's not so much that it would factor into like my best games of all time. It's just, like I said, like when I go back to the games that I was looking at here, that I'm making notes of here, Army of Two, The 40th Day, Kane and Lynch 2, Dog Days, True Crime Streets of LA, Scarface, The World Is Yours, the EA published Godfather 2 video game. They're all titles that were like getting, depending, like it varied from like game to game, but like even like Kane and Lynch and Kane and Lynch 2, they were getting like 6s at the time. Like they weren't particularly well reviewed games. The first one controversially so, but I always just had a weird sort of like, there was something about like the kind of the grittiness of those games and how ugly they were that kind of that quite appealed to me. And I think that some of that applies to games like Army of Two, The 40th Day, and Scarface, The World Is Yours. Yeah, that's it, my mind goes back to that region, that era, for some reason when asked that question.
That is a great era, actually. It's funny you said like Army of Two, and that I remember playing the first Army of Two game, and thinking how good it was, and thinking like this is and
how did it review? I've got to double check.
I think it did all right. I think 40th Day was the one that got us a bit slammed. But not a bad game really. Like it's just a weird game in some respects.
Both low 70s.
Oh, okay, so not bad then. Well, not good, but not bad.
See, that's the thing. Like it's not bad, and it makes sense, and it's probably in line with what we thought. Maybe we kind of slightly liked it slightly more because it's inherent sort of like appeal to our sensibilities. But like nowadays, if a big like a visceral equivalent developer and EA equivalent publisher put out a new IP like third-person shooter, you wouldn't call it dead on arrival with a 72 on Metacritic, but you'd be like, oh, there's work to be done.
Yeah, nobody would say that was a success. They wouldn't be like, yeah, well done, you've done a successful launch. Yeah. Another couple that I'd put in there, again, I think I'm similar to you. Like, I don't think people would say they were bad games, but I think it's more over that they wouldn't be regarded, people wouldn't put them high up on any list. One would have to be, and I think it is unfairly overlooked, but probably for good reason, is GTA 3. GTA 3 was groundbreaking in so many ways, like for me personally. Like I think nowadays it's easy to look back and say, come on, like Vice City or like San Andreas, or it's easy to say those things now. But actually, I think without GTA 3, you don't have any of those games. Even then, like the difference between GTA 2 and GTA 3 is completely different. Like they're completely different games. And without GTA 3, you wouldn't have had any of the others. I don't think, because that set the groundwork for what they were going to be like. And it blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. It's still to this day a game that I think I can remember missions from. I can remember like things you have to do in that game, and it was because I was so excited about how good it was. One that you often bring up that how can I not mention has got to be Warrior Within, the Prince of Persia game from like early 2000s. Again, because it was like a weird sort of departure from.
Now you're just picking out like games that would like in GTA 3 and Prince of Persia Warrior Within. You're picking massively critically acclaimed, massive selling games. I
know, but I'm saying they wouldn't be on other people's top fives. Nobody would put them on their top five list. That's what I can't really think of any of the games that I would say are bad games that I would put up there. This is terrible. It's so much easier to take games that other people would like and say that they're not that good.
Yeah. Like when you said we're talking about Warrior Within, I thought you were going to say The Warriors, which I was also going to completely agree with.
The Warriors. The Warriors was actually quite a good game. That's interesting.
But then I'd also, this is the tricky thing about Shell's question, is like I wouldn't put the Warriors on my top 5. Of course not. I wouldn't put any of the games I've talked about today on my top 5. My top 5 would all be games that would be on other people's top 5, I think. But then, I don't know. Like,
but because I agree.
Is completely unique to me. That I don't know if there is one.
Yeah, it's really hard to say games that if it's games that people don't like. It's weird because there's usually always an audience for it. There's always a group of people that do really like it. I don't think there's any games. Maybe Evolve is going to be the biggest
Evolve
one
is I think the best shout we've got from this conversation in terms of fitting the criteria.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. It's tricky. I can't think of any others. We should we should actually do a list and actually sit down for probably take weeks to try and put together an actual decent list of games we like and other people don't. That's the same.
Maybe.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting.
Would be interesting.
I guess.
Great question.
That is a good question. So it's a good question when it's a thoughts where we're still thinking about how we're going to answer the question after we've answered the question. Maybe we'll get back to on that. Maybe not. Maybe we'll hey, if we make some end of the year six lists again, some Christmas present six lists, maybe something like this pops up.
Yeah.
I don't know. We've got to finish the fucking quarry first. We've got things to do. One of the things, though, that Jonesy often interrupts our ability to do the things we need to do is our desire to just play and watch or just about do anything else other than something productive or proactive. Which leads me to the question, what have you been up to in the last week that has occupied your time?
Unfortunately, I haven't had time to play many games. It's that time of year. It's like it's the summer holidays in the UK. I guess it is for America as well, and like Canada and a couple of other countries. Yeah, it makes it a little bit more difficult to have time to play too many games. But I am now in a new office. So I'm actually not in my house anymore. I've actually got some decent office space. And I recently moved over my Vive and my little lighthouses and everything. My original Vive. I don't have a new fancy one. And I've wanted to play some more Half-Life Alyx for quite a long time because I hadn't finished it. And one of the reasons I didn't was because I was getting kind of pissed off with trying to play it in my small-ass dining room with like no space and having to like move around. And because it's not, you don't need room scale for Half-Life Alyx. You can walk around and you can do stuff. But I just kept like banging into shit. Like I'd bang into my table, I'd bang into my stairs because you have to turn. And I think I even had one bit where I was trying to look inside a box. And I went to pull it and I literally punched my stairs and hurt my hand. So I was like, okay.
Oh, because your knuckles are still protruding from the thingy.
Exactly, yeah. So I was like, do you know what? This is ridiculous. So then I stopped playing it. But now that I've got a lot more space, I booted it up and had a little more play and did not have fun at all.
Oh, why?
Because I need to get back into it. Like, you know when you haven't played a game for a while? I couldn't remember how to reload the gun, for one.
Well, it's a VR game, so it's probably something to do with let the clip fall out of the gun somehow and put the next one in.
No, it is, but I had no bullets, and then I couldn't. I also had grenade, and I couldn't remember where you put ammo and stuff. I was like, have I got ammo? I've just forgotten it. So I'm doing not Beat Saber. What is it, like Space Pirate Trainer? I'm like, is it behind my back? Is it down here? Like, how have I got no ammo? Where do I keep ammo? And then, so I was just kind of like trying to sort this out. And then I found grenades. I was like, oh, it's a grenade, isn't it? How do I use the grenade? I can't remember how to use it. And it's like, which button is it? And I'm like opening menus and changing what I'm holding. And
sorry, I'll save it actually.
I think I played for about an hour and a half. And by the end, I was like, okay, I remember how to do this. I remember how to do that. And then it was like a couple of annoying bits where I was trying to fight face huggers and monsters, alien monsters, whatever the hell they are, coming at me. And it was one of those where it wanted me to like go and get the ammo from the side to load the gun and shoot the thing before it got me. And because I hadn't played it that recently, everything was slow and clunky. And so trying to be quick and agile was not really helping. But what also kind of frustrated me a little bit about that game was I remember Half-Life being quite sort of an agile, fun, shooter with horror elements. But one of the issues I had in Half-Life Alyx is in just this little bit of the playthrough I was doing, I was in a underground train station area where I had to get out of there and into a hotel. And they obviously knew that the problem they had with like ammo and stuff. So they literally just had grenades everywhere. So you just walk along and there was a grenade, and then a guy came around a corner and you throw the grenade, and then there was another guy came around a corner and there's another grenade just sitting on the side. And then you walk to the next section, and then there were just some more grenades there. And I'm like, all right, so now more guys are going to come out. And they still have the problem. They haven't dealt with the mobility issue in VR, so that they have to get around it by going, don't worry about the enemies, because there's all this stuff right here, really nicely. There's a grenade and some ammo and some whatever, so you can pick it up and chuck it. But it just detracts from the gameplay side of it. It's still so cool to be inside the Half-Life world and to be able to, and that like the game looks fantastic. Like the way that you can, see everything and interact with stuff is still wicked. But it's not there yet, and I forgot how far it needs to go before it's a fully fledged game. In general, games in general in VR before they're fully fledged game titles. And Half-Life Alyx it's more of a Half-Life VR experience, which I should have remembered. I've played it before, but yeah. But no, I need to get back in there and crack on, whatever.
Kind of bums me out hearing you say that. Like, it's I guess the way you're describing the experience in a moment-to-moment capacity doesn't differ that much from what my understanding of that game was, but it sounds like you're a bit more negative about it. Like, I still remember Half-Life Alyx as the thing that made me jealous of people that had headsets just a handful of years ago. And now, like, in the course of one conversation, I'm like,
Do you know what it is? There's sections of that game that I remember quite well but when I played it originally, which is like when you walk outside and you look up and you've got the ship or whatever, and the buildings and stuff, and it looks insane. And then you have the health stations where you like pull the thing down, put your hand on it, and you've got to put it, and it's wicked. And that stuff is incredible. But it lends itself to almost like a VR movie that you could be interactive with. And maybe that's what needs to happen. That's where we're at the moment. It's more like it should be more like a movie where you have set pieces. Whereas because it's still trying to get you to walk around and it's trying to be a Half-Life game, it's going, no, you can walk around. And those are the bits that definitely bring you down, because you're holding a button on your controller to walk around, which is what I don't like anyway. And then you've got that, you can click another button to turn around, which again is a way around movement, but it's not great. And then when you get these kind of, I'm trying to, there's something, what is the thing I'm trying to think that really reminds me of? So, okay, as an example, when you see, like Alien, the xenomorphs in Alien that are really fast and they're terrifying and, they sort of come at you really quickly. When you watch them in a movie, it works. And when you play in a game like we played Fireteams Elite, like it works because you can be quick and dynamic and it fits the world. If you made a VR game with xenomorphs and facehuggers in it, you would have to slow them down to such a degree that it would almost change what they are. And I think that's the same issue that Half-Life has got, is that the things in that game are like jumpy and scary and you want the interactive side and you just don't have it yet in VR. It's too slow and clunky, is what I'm trying to get at. It's a long-winded way of saying it's slow and clunky. But let's move on from something that's not slow and clunky. That's what's slow and clunky in Half-Life Alyx. It's me, let's be honest.
There is one thing, though, that I just want to say, that I point out that it is very funny to me, is that you started off that segment by talking about how much harder it is to play video games at the moment because it's summer holidays and you've got the kids around, and like in this era of Switches and Steam Decks and mobile phones and stuff like that, the one game experience you did make time for was a fully immersed virtual reality experience. Summer holidays and kids and stuff like that. Yeah, so I spent a few hours in VR.
Well, that's because I was in the office with my PC and my Vive, and no kids, and I could just do it for like an hour and a half.
Something tells me, Jonesy, that you should pick up a couple of new releases and tell your wife you need to spend a few days in the office. And one of the issues when it comes to the Switch and PlayStation and everything is my kids are on them all the time. Get a Steam Deck and don't tell them about it. That
is a good idea. That's a good idea.
Tell them it's daddy's. It's for work.
I've told them they're not allowed to play some stuff because my kids are 6 and 3, and my 3-year-old, he goes and gets the Switch on his own. He goes and sits down, and he plays Kirby, and he loves it. Like he'll just get on there and start cracking, and then I'll be like, "Oh, I was going to play the Switch," and he's playing it. And if I pick it up, he comes over. What you playing? And I'm like, it's nothing that you need to worry about. He's like, can I play? Can we play together? What you playing? Like, so that's one of the things. And then the PlayStation, Jesus, they're on it all. The PlayStation, they're on all the time. So I only get to play that when they go to sleep, which is sad. But they enjoy it, so I'm not going to say anything. My 6-year-old's getting damn good at games as well, which is kind of scary. I don't think it'll be that long before he's.
There's money in that, Jonesy.
Yes, no, that is very true. That is true. But do you know what? I will touch on something else I've done as well that I can't really do when the kids are there, just in case it's not kid appropriate. Which is, I started watching the new Star Trek series, Strange New Worlds, which I've wanted to for ages since I even heard about it, and I didn't know how I watch it. And then I found out that it was on Paramount TV Plus in the UK, so I could sign up. I think it was like free for the first week as well. Signed up, so I've watched a few episodes of that, and I'm happy to report it does feel very Star Trek, which is one of the things I've been lacking in the last few the movies, obviously with Chris Pine. They're very cool, but they're not like Star Trek, the TV show. Because I like the original series, The Next Generation, Voyager, like I love all those things. And even like Enterprise. Sorry, go on. Picard, yeah, I started watching Picard and I will finish it, but it's not like it's not Star Trek. It's not like a Star Trek series. It's more like a character, from what I can tell. It's more like a character thing about Picard and him.
Has that mental season of Picard that brings back all the old actors come out yet?
Yeah, that's out. Yeah,
that's out. The one where like
from what I understand, it's out.
I can't remember which season it was meant to be, but one of them where they were like, fuck it, we've tried to make the show good, we can't, so we're just going to bring back all the crazy... We're going to bring back LeVar Burton and Jonathan Frakes.
I'm pretty certain that was that's season 2, right? That was the lot that came out. And I really want to see it. I love all those characters. I grew up on The Next Generation. Like, I love Star Trek. But when I started watching Picard, I really missed the... just like the Enterprise flying around and it's all nice and happy, and then something messed up happens, and then all the shit hits the fan and they've got to save the day, and then by the end of the episode everything's all lovely again, and then in the next episode,
like The Simpsons,
it's the same thing. And they cover so many topics, and they deal with like, holograms that are run by AI becoming conscious and like leaving the holodeck and messing with shit, or I don't even know, like Worf's got to go and fight someone with a bat'leth because they're, for his honor or whatever. I love all that stuff. That was what I really got into about Star Trek. And they even had like moral lessons, and it would deal with like weird scientific stuff and psychological issues. It was covered the gamut. And that's what I was really hoping to get a bit more of. And the Voyager's the same as that. Like Deep Space Nine's, I think, to a lesser degree. But then like Picard is much more of from what I could tell, is much more of like, it's just following Picard and it's his journey. So I kind of fell off really quickly. And the Osiris, funnily enough, Seth MacFarlane's comedy show, is something that was kind of filling the gap I had for that sort of Star Trek thing, because it's a Star Trek ripoff, and it is a Star Trek show. Like, right. I don't know if have you seen it?
No, I've no idea what that is. So I
amazing.
Yeah, I thing is, I've got absolutely. I just don't know anything about Star Trek. Like, Star Trek didn't have any impact or bearing on me whatsoever for my entire life. I've seen a couple of the movies that you mentioned with Chris Pine, but that's it. I've never seen an episode of any other season of any other Star Trek show. I don't know anything about it.
Well, so Strange New Worlds is actually set just before the original series. So it's like 6 years, I think, before James T. Kirk takes over the Enterprise.
Okay.
I believe it's 6 years before. So yeah, he takes over, and it feels very much like it fits in that whole canon thing. They have a weird thing in Star Trek now because there's an alternate timeline, but this, I think, is not that. I don't even know. I'll have to check. Someone let me know in the comments. Does the new series Strange New Worlds fit with the original Star Trek timeline, or is it a new on the movie timeline, which was weird and went different because obviously Khan, it all went mental. But anyway, so that's what I've been doing this week. So
Benedict Cumberbatch is Khan. I remember that.
Yes, in the new timeline, he's Khan.
Right. Okay.
Yes. It gets fucking complicated. Why do they do this? I watched Doctor Strange a few weeks ago, and I'm like, I'm so over the multiple universe thing.
Star Trek maybe doesn't have a choice there because it's been around for so long, and there's been so many iterations, so many different ships and crews and eras and stuff like that. At some point, they accidentally started overlapping, I'm sure, and they're like, fuck, we've got to create...
No. That's not. I don't see why they had to do that at all. They could have just gone after the next generation.
Keep going forward, but then at some point, I don't know. Yeah, you're right. You could just keep going forward indefinitely.
But they went back. And then they went sideways. It's like, maybe just go forward. Maybe just go 100 years after the events of the next generation, when no one can remember what canon would have had going on now anyway, and just do your own thing.
Also, Jonesy, I can confirm. I don't know if this piques your interest, but the thing I was referring to about Star Trek Picard is season 3, which is coming early next year, and it is.
It's not. I thought it was out already. I thought they had the.
No, so it's LeVar Burton, Michael Dorn, Jonathan Frakes, Gates McFadden, Marina Sirtis, Brent Spiner, Jerry Ryan, and Michelle Hurd are all coming back.
All right, hit me. Go again. Read.
Do you want the character names or the actor names?
The character. I want the actor names, but slower.
LeVar Burton,
Geordie LaForge,
Michael Dorn,
Worf,
Jonathan Frakes,
Riker,
Gates McFadden,
Beverly Crusher,
Marina Sirtis.
Oh, I had such a crush on her as a kid. That is Deanna Troi.
You're 100% so far. Brent Spiner.
That is Data.
Jerry Ryan.
Jerry Ryan is 7 of 9.
And Michelle Hurd.
Shit. I don't know that one. Michelle Hurd.
She was... Oh, actually... Oh, so Michelle Hurd is a character from Picard who's returning in this season.
Ah, right, okay. That is my childhood. Right. Those characters are my child. I'm even... Because there's even a difference between... Do you like Gates McFadden as the Doctor? Or do you like the previous Doctor? And I'm Gates McFadden. I think she's better. And then you've got also security officer, because before Worf, it was the female head of security who died in an episode, and I didn't like her. I like Michael Dorn as Worf.
Okay, interesting. Well, then you're a happy
okay.
man.
But it depends, because it depends what they do with the series. It depends what sort of missions they go on and how it works.
I can tell you that Batalis confirmed that these would not be brief cameo appearances, and said all of the cast would appear together in the season. After initially avoiding bringing back the full cast, executive producer Alex Kurtzman said they had a good story reason to reunite them in the 3rd season, and the producers felt they had earned the right to do so after the first 2 seasons.
That's cool. There's a little part of me that worries it's going to be like an old people's home. I'm sure it won't be, but they've all got to be getting on. Like Picard is well old.
Patrick Stewart as a character or an actor?
An actor.
Patrick Stewart is 82. Fuck me.
Wow. Like the others are obviously a lot. Well, I was going to say a lot younger, but maybe they're not a lot
younger. Like maybe LeVar Burton going strong at 65. Michael Dorn's 69. Frakes is 69 as well.
They're all getting up there. They're not that old though. But Patrick Stewart is the one who strikes me as like being a lot older. Interesting. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, people that like video games. I've talked about Star Trek far too much. People who hate Star Wars are going to be doubling down with the people who hate Star Trek now. They're going to be getting pissed off. That'll be the last time I talk about Star Trek, though. Unless a Star Trek game comes out, which I really hope they make. I would love it.
You could just
made a good Star Trek game.
Renew your subscription to Star Trek Online, Jonesy. Just bring that whole fad back.
Do you know what? Here's something that's going to happen. This is what I'm going to do for Shell Shock. Do you know what? And I'm not going to talk about it though. I'll say it in the Discord. I'm going to get Star Trek the video game, which is awful, apparently.
The one based on the movie?
Yes.
The recent movies?
Because I've always wanted to play it, but I never did because it's so bad, apparently. I will get it and I will play it, and I will, on the Discord, talk about that as one of the 5, maybe,
nice.
that I like that everyone else hates.
If it's got online co-op and it's on Steam, I'll play it with you.
I would love that, because it is a co-op thing. It's
Spock and Kirk, right?
Yes, yeah. So I think it does. It must have online co-op.
The question is, was there a PC port, and is it like readily available on Steam?
I don't know.
And
I don't know. I don't know about any of that.
Does it still function?
Probably not, because it was apparently so bad. The AI is supposed to be terrible.
You say that, companion. I think it sold pretty well, or I assume
did
it
it
sold
really?
Pretty well. I don't know. There must be a reason I remember it. Is all I'm thinking.
Oh, and because of how bad it was. I think that's what everyone.
Is this the one that came out in 2013? Even that seems too late. There was a PC version. It did review horribly. Metacritic. The PS3 version has a 45 on Metacritic.
Oh wow, that is really bad.
Which is really, really nasty. Star Trek Into Darkness director J.J. Abrams stated in September 2013 that he was hurt by the game's poor reception and quality.
I like that he was hurt by the reception and the quality. Surely you got to be hurt by one or the other. How can you be hurt by the
No,
reception if the quality is bad?
If the quality was bad, the reception was good, he'd be like, "Oh, thank God, the fans loved it. We made it for the fans."
What I mean is, if you're hurt by the quality, you shouldn't be hurt by the reception because you know it's terrible. You should be like, yeah, that makes sense. Or you should like the quality and be hurt by the reception. Do you know what I mean? You can't be hurt by something which is shit that you put out there. You've hurt me with you've said it's bad. It's like, you know it's bad. You said it was bad.
I reckon you need to take this up with
JJ
Abrams, Jonesy.
Well, yeah, we'll look into that. Jamie and I'll look into that, and if it is multiplayer, we'll stream some. We'll stream how bad that game is.
We can commit to that. In the meantime, Jonesy, do you want to start rolling through what's happened in the last week in the games industry?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
Well, all right. In that case, then, let's pick up pretty much where last week's podcast left off, because as we signed off last time, I think it wasn't quite that night, it was the next day, I believe. THQ Nordic, who, for anyone counting, are indeed an Embracer Group subsidiary / were the Embracer Group / it's a messy one, but basically THQ Nordic, a part of the Embracer family, let's just say, held a digital showcase last week for a bunch of upcoming titles. It was a bit of a mixed bag, Jonesy, I can't lie. Some things that were kind of like remakes or long-awaited sequels to games that clearly are fan favourites in some corners of the world. Sometimes games that were massive in certain countries, and sometimes games that just have really small but really hardcore fan bases. But I thought we'd pick out some of the more interesting titles to us and what we thought our community might be interested in, one of which has to include the first thing that was shown in the whole showcase, which is the official unveiling of Alone in the Dark, a reimagining, they're calling it, of the classic horror series. Apparently it's been in development for 4 years, and one thing that might interest people is that Mikhail Hedberg, who is a writer on both Amnesia and Soma, two, I'd say modern horror classics in a roundabout way, is over there directing and writing. So that, as I said, was officially revealed, and we got our first look at a trailer for that. Some people saying it kind of gave them sort of like Resi 2 remake vibes in terms of how it's been modernized and updated, and the visuals and presentation, and how it's kind of been adjusted to a more conventional, over the shoulder, third person perspective, befitting of a modern day release. What were your kind of vibes off this as an initial reaction?
I thought there was a weird humor to it, which I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
And which didn't kind of fit some of the gameplay. But if it does go down that kind of less survival horror thing and more of like there's a bit of a tongue in cheekness to it, or maybe not tongue in cheek, but maybe just a slight lightheartedness to some of the horror. I think that's a much more sort of pleasing direction for me. Like there's so many like out and out scary / horror / like, you know, Dead Space or Callisto Protocol. Like there's so many of those sorts of games coming out. I don't think we need a remake of an older sort of horror game in that stable. I think we can absolutely have something that's a little bit different. What did you think? What was your take?
Yeah, similar. And what it made me do was not just sort of open my eyes for the potential for something different in that kind of genre or subgenre, but also just made me realise that in spite of the fact that I recognise Alone in the Dark as kind of like an OG horror franchise, and like people have got stories about going to their friends' houses back in the 90s and playing Resident Evil for the first time or playing Silent Hill for the first time. For some reason, I have that with Alone in the Dark. I remember going to my friend Jack's house when I would have been about, I think we were about 8 or 9, and he had an Alone in the Dark game on, it would have been PS1, playing that. And what it made me realise is that all these years, and I don't know what those original games were like, I'd put it in that same bracket as a Resident Evil or a Silent Hill, and I actually know very little about what Alone in the Dark really is, or what it's about, or what its kind of history is, and
me too,
whether or not, like slightly more comedic or tongue-in-cheek or even self-aware elements could be squeezed in there without it being unusual or out of the ordinary for the series. So curious to see if that is a direction. I played the demo for the attempted reboot, which I remember kind of tried to take like a kind of a TV kind of procedural element to it, with like every time you load it up, it was like previously on Alone in the Dark, and like I remember thinking that was quite cool. It had some cool ideas, but was also quite janky. But I hope there's an angle here. Like, yes, you're bringing in someone with real writing chops in the form of Mikhail Hedberg, and I'm sure you can make something very scary. But you're absolutely right. Like, in a world where Resident Evil is doing what it's doing, and there and the independent or sort of like triple I horror scene. When you look at like, I don't know, like Bloober Team, people like whoever you want to look, like there's a lot of horror out there. Like the horror appetite has grown, the horror market has grown. You need to think of an interesting twist for a reason to bring something like this back, and I hope they find it.
Yeah, definitely agreed.
Yeah, elsewhere, another game though that caught both of our eyes, Jonesy, from Three Fields Entertainment, who is a group of developers that previously worked on series like Burnout and Need for Speed. They kind of came back a handful of years ago, for anyone that remembers random indie titles like Dangerous Golf, which we actually played in the ATG days, Jonesy, and they moved on to Dangerous Driving, and I think there was a Dangerous Driving 2, none of which were out of this world, but they're clearly still trying to head further and further back into the direction of the peak Burnout formula that they themselves created back in the day, and they are trying again to do so with their new game, Recreation. That's Rec spelt WRECK. Get it? Wreck, like wreck your car. Like, oops, you wrecked your car in a big car accident and now it's flipping all over the place. It looked fun.
It did look fun. I thought this looked really cool. It was a weird one because it was like, it looked like they'd watched a whole load of those shorts where people share, where it's like a GTA mod or whatever, where they're just driving around really weird levels, and they'd gone like, yeah, let's just make that a game. And then they'd maybe played a bit too much Hot Wheels and said, we should tie these things together and give people creation tools to make crazy tracks and do crazy shit and get smashed up. But it looked cool. It looked like a lot of fun. It was something that I could actually imagine playing and saying. I'd even go so far as they had like Fall Guys elements, because they had the big fans spinning around and knocking people out and taking out cars and things. And things that would like knock you off the track and that. And I was like, that's actually quite a cool concept. It's gonna rely again on, we've said this before, like it's gonna rely on people building good tracks and people that people want to race on. Whether they're just going to rely on user-generated content for that, I don't know. Hopefully, there will be a load of in-house designers who are making cool tracks as well. But it's something that I could easily see a lot of people getting into.
For sure. Assuming again that it's released the right way and priced the right way. I think the other thing it's going to live and die on though is, have they nailed the kind of like the feel of those crash mechanics?
Right.
Like, I remember one of the things that they nailed in, I think it was Burnout 3, was just that, like, that was a game where there was literally a mode called Crash Mode, and everything was so fine-tuned and so fun to control and so dynamic and interesting that, like, the whole game felt like it could have been, I mean, Burnout has always been a great racing game, don't get me wrong, but, like, the crashing mechanics of their own felt worthy of those ideas being further explored in spin-off games. I just hope this is where Three Fields finally kind of find that balance, and that in making it kind of this occasionally surprisingly large scale, as you mentioned correctly, I think Hot Wheels-esque racing game doesn't dilute the formula too much. Because if they end up making like an average racing game with occasional Fall Guys style traps and average to good or middling like community support, then I don't know. You don't want to work in too many pitfalls where a game could collapse in itself. And I'm not suggesting that's what they've done, but I just hope they get the fundamentals right. And to get the fundamentals right with that pedigree, they didn't need to make something this big or ambitious. But at the same time, I admire that they have. I don't know if that point kind of was clearly communicated there, but yeah.
No, I think I get what you mean. Yeah, absolutely. It was yes. Because they could have done something simpler and smaller a scale and it would still kind of tick all those boxes, but they've kind of gone big. They're like, no, we're going big and we're going over the top. We're doing... But...
Like, their Dangerous Driving games like didn't have like big tracks. They were like short like things where you were doing big crashes and setting off chains of events and getting high scores. And they never quite nailed that. And they're already moving on to the next big thing, which is like adding racing and sort of like... custom tracks and so on and so forth into it. So I just hope it all comes together.
I don't know if it was just a visual sort of hook that they did it, but I wondered if actually part of it was like that people could dynamically alter the tracks as people were racing.
Yeah, and things could like fall onto the track while you were going along, and like there was a hint. I couldn't tell if that was a bit of flair that they were using for the sake of a trailer, or if that was a gameplay mechanic.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, good. That it's not just if we were both confused about the same thing, then hopefully it's not an us problem.
It makes for an interesting concept as well, like that someone can be going around changing the track as you're driving on it.
Yes.
But also maybe annoying, because if you're playing online and someone just like deletes a section of the track, which means you can't race on it, then obviously that just pisses you off.
It's that fine balance between like a multiplayer experience that's different every time as a result of something like that, but also has that unreliability that you can never quite maybe get good at it, or you can never master it because it's always got that hint of like, oh, I maybe know this route like the back of my hand, and I take this corner at this point, and this is the apex I try and hit, and it's like, there was a ramp there this time. But that could be...
They dropped a cow on it.
Yeah, exactly. Someone dropped a fucking airplane on my car and now I can't move. And I have to restart. But hey, it's all a balancing act. And I look forward to seeing what kind of a balance they strike with all that stuff. I don't think there's a release date for that one as of yet. I could be wrong there, but yeah, we shall keep tabs on it. We then, though, Jonesy, kind of got into the middle sort of like chunk of the showcase, which, I'll be honest, I don't know if you felt the same way. It was a little bit niche, let's say. Lots of titles that even if they had 2s and 3s at the end of the name, or even if they were remakes of things, or even if I'd like vaguely heard of them, they still weren't necessarily for me. So I might just rattle through a few examples of those, and you stop me if anything piques your interest. What I've heard described as the most iconic German RPG ever, Gothic, is being remade for the current generation of consoles by Alchemia Interactive. Jagged Alliance 3 is going to combine a strategic campaign with turn-based tactical combat and RPG elements. And then finally, from Appeal Studios, we have Outcast 2, A New Beginning, which is currently stated as coming soon to PC, PS5, Xbox Series S/X. A remake and 2 sequels, Jonesy.
Yeah, the Outcast 2 kind of piqued my interest a little bit, just because of some of the...
Do you have any familiarity with Outcast 1? Because
no,
it's a thing that I feel like I recognise like key art, or I recognise the protagonist, but I don't even know why.
Do you know what? I didn't recognise it at all. But that's just one of those weird things is when you see a sequel and you think, oh, this actually looks pretty good. Like, how have I never heard of the original? If this is the kind of game it is. But then it kind of got into some more of the gameplay, and it did maybe seem like it seemed a level of polish below, a lot of other games. And so maybe that's why. Maybe it was a smaller game, smaller budget, but it has got fans out there. That's why they're making a sequel. But I don't know. But it's something to keep an eye on for sure, because I like the way the dude was traversing around the environment with like a jetpack and flying around and fighting some of those weird robots and stuff. It looked pretty cool. But yeah.
It gets even weirder, Jonesy, I will say, when you look at the Wikipedia and you read that, so it was developed by Appeal and released by Infogrames for Windows in 1999. The game was critically acclaimed. It was named Adventure Game of the Year by GameSpot in 1999. A sequel
1999, though.
Yeah. A sequel called Outcast 2, The Lost Paradise, was never finished due to bankruptcy. You look at the reviews, GameSpot gave it an 8.6 out of 10, IGN gave it an 8.5 out of 10, PC Gamer gave it 90%, Edge gave it an 8. It wasn't a badly reviewed game by any means. In fact, it was a well-reviewed game, but it also it sold 12,000 copies in the United States by the end of the year it came out.
12,000?
12,000, yeah.
Wow. Okay, there you go. That's why we've never played it, because no one played it. Oh my. Okay, I'm looking at the trailer.
Global sales for Outcast ultimately reached 400,000 units by 2002. So its first 3 years on the market, it hit 400k. Not bad, and but by those standards, arguably, the turn of the century, better still. But also, like, not great.
Yeah, it's a weird game. I've never seen this game before. It's a weird looking game as well. Like I said, I watched a bit of the trailer for it. But I can see what... Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, does this count as one of those games that you and I are convinced that no one could have ever really liked or had nostalgia for, so that whenever you see someone who's super gassed about Outcast 2, you're just like, you never played Outcast, you're lying. You have no idea what to hear about.
I think it is one of those games.
You're made up.
Like that, there will be, don't get me wrong, if you're listening to this and you're like, what are you talking about? I loved Outcast. I'm not suggesting we're not suggesting that's not true. But there will be a subset of gamers online who come out and they'll be like a whole Reddit thing. Like, oh yeah, I love Outcast. I can't wait for Outcast 2. It's like, no, you're 18. You've definitely never played it. The game is older than you are. don't now tell me that this is a game you've been looking forward to, and for the last 10 years or whatever.
Yeah.
But it looked fun. Yeah, Jesus, check out the trailer for the first Outcast game, because damn, games have changed, which is a definite positive. But yeah, I haven't really got much else to say about it.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, Jonesy, beyond the Jagged Alliances and the Gothics of the world, there were also a couple more known quantities that they rounded out the show with. One I get out the way quickly is AEW Fight Forever, which is a little partnership between THQ Nordic and sort of new WWE competitor All Elite Wrestling, and they're making an intentionally arcade-style wrestling game. I think it's even developed by, I think they're called Ukes, who used to make all the WWE games before sort of 2K eventually took over. So they're probably going for that throwback kind of early noughties PS2 era wrestling game. Interesting to see whether they hit that dynamic and whether they kind of find that right balance between nostalgic but also fun and modernized when that comes out. Likewise, we're going to see the return of Crypto. I know you played the remake of Destroy All Humans on your Twitch account. God, was that last year or the year before? I can't even remember.
Year before, I think.
Crazy. Were you going to get another opportunity too when the PS2 game Destroy All Humans 2 Reprobed launches later this month, I believe?
It looks cool. It looks fun. I like Destroy All Humans. I'm up for jumping back in, having another blast. I don't think they did enough with the remake when they remade the first one. This kind of looks like it's in the same ballpark as the remake, which is fine. Like, it is what it is. I'd maybe like to see a little bit more, but it looks like a lot of fun. It looks like they've progressed the story, and now you're going to be fighting giant aliens, not just fighting humans and destroying all humans. You're also going to be destroying alien monsters. Adds a new dynamic to the thing. Adds a new. I mean, they even did the line in the trailer, which was like, "Oh no, Crypto, your weapons aren't going to be effective." And you're like, "Oh great!" So it's given me a whole impetus to go and get a whole bunch of new weapons in the game. Like, yeah, that works. I could do that. Yeah. I do laugh because these days I always think of things as people being insanely careful about jokes they make in that. But there is also a joke they made at the end of the trailer where like the Russian spy, like very well endowed woman, falls over and Crypto's like, "Little Crypto's rising," or something like that, which I was surprised at. But at least they still got that, some of that sort of humor from the era.
There's a lot that they can take away from us, but they cannot take away our boner jokes.
They can't take away boner jokes from Crypto. No, not at all. Right. But it looks fun. Yeah, it looks fun.
Yeah. No, I'm interested in the same way that you are, in so much as I actually have a lot more. In fact, I almost exclusively have a memory of playing the first Destroy All Humans game on PS2. Very little memory or awareness of where that series went afterwards. So if they continue to remake these games, I'm going to be interested to see kind of what I missed out on back in the day through the lens of these remakes, which, hey, they may continue to come if this game continues to sell well. This series continues to sell well. And then
one thing I will say about Destroy, I would love just a brand new Destroy All Humans game. Like, that to me is, well, it's kind of frustrating that we say this about other games as well. Like, you get Resident Evil and games like that. It's fine because they're remaking those because, hey, they're still making Resident Evil games. But so you can kind of have both. It's fine to remake games, but it would be nice to see all balls to the wall, brand new Destroy All Humans game where they're not. Maybe I'm being unfair by saying that the remakes doesn't look that great, but I would just love to see them go, "No, this is brand new, this is fresh. Here you go." That would be nice. Well, as a fan of this.
What I was going to say though, Jonesy, is that if we continue, and of course you never know, but if we did continue supporting these remakes and we did purchase Destroy All Humans 2 Reprobed en masse, that could be something that remains in the future of the series, because that's exactly what is happening to our old friend SpongeBob SquarePants. Because, of course, you can't say THQ without saying Nickelodeon. The story over there is that the team behind SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, which was a remake of kind of a beloved SpongeBob SquarePants platformer from yesteryear, have been given the license to make a brand new SpongeBob SquarePants, and they are doing so in the form of SpongeBob SquarePants The Cosmic Shake, which is a new 3D platformer that sees SpongeBob and Patrick travelling to a multitude of different wish worlds, each with its own setting and rules. Purple Lamp Studios, they're called, who made Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated. So again, there is some implication there, some suggestion there that THQ Nordic might be using, as others have before, remakes and remasters and so on and so forth, as a way for testing the waters for a brand new title. It happened to Crash Bandicoot as well. Like they remastered the original trilogy and that sold so well they made a brand new original Crash game. Of course, different publisher entirely, different setup entirely, but it's not unusual for that to kind of be what's going on. And so maybe that's something that remains in Detroit Humans' future, should that game sell well enough, or should any targets be hit. I'm not really sure what the metrics are there. But how do you feel, Jonesy, going back to the sponge himself, about the Cosmic Shake?
This is where I admit, like, I've never played a SpongeBob game. I've never watched SpongeBob. I must have seen some of one at one point. I've seen more memes. If you put together my meme time, time spent watching SpongeBob memes, it would be like,
Greenwich meme time.
It would be a lot. The actual time I spent watching SpongeBob, the actual show, would be a tiny fraction of that.
I can relate.
So yeah, I'm happy for SpongeBob fans. It's one
too.
of those. I feel strange about SpongeBob, because sometimes people will say they'll reference something from SpongeBob, and I feel like it's a complete area where I have complete blindness because I've no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're always incredulous at the fact that you don't know what they're talking about. Like, you're amazed that I haven't seen this one Nickelodeon show from years ago. But
I didn't have Nickelodeon. I was too old for it. It was an American show that I never had access to, and like, of course, I never watched it. Like,
yeah. Oh yeah, no, I think age-wise, yeah, like that's the main thing. And for you, there never would have been a time where it would have made sense to watch SpongeBob.
Don't get me wrong. I now have watched. I watch shitloads of kids stuff now because I have kids, so I could tell you all about Paw Patrol and all about
would you ever,
PJ Masks, but not SpongeBob.
6 and 3, maybe not the perfect ages, but would you ever, if there was like a complete lack of anything new or interesting on streaming services, for example, that you wanted to find an interesting middle ground between what your kids watch and what you watch, where you're just like, fuck it, we're just going to start season 1, episode 1 of SpongeBob, and all of us are going to watch it. I'm going to watch it with them, and we're going to see what's going on.
Maybe if I put it on and if I had watched one and it was actually good, then yeah, possibly. But there is so much.
I did that with my brother and Adventure Time during the period
Right.
where I liked Adventure Time, and he was of an age where it made sense to watch Adventure Time, and I was like, this is bonding, right?
Yeah,
this works.
Exactly. Like I've watched so much. I never watched Pokemon before having kids, and now I've watched loads of Pokemon because my 6-year-old loves Pokemon. And similar with like Bluey. What a great goddamn show that show is! Like, I love Bluey.
No idea what that is.
Yeah, exactly. Of course you don't.
You could do it with The Simpsons. That you can stream all of those now. You just like wait till your oldest gets to like 9 and be like, we're gonna just watch all The Simpsons, because those are, I think, some of those are still legitimately wonderful to go back to.
Oh no, they are. I was going to say, I think the problem with The Simpsons is it's actually not written for kids, and young kids. I don't think
you would laugh
more
than they would
so easily. Oh yeah, for sure. Like kids shows are so bright and colourful and dynamic, and also the age my kids are, they're so basic as well. They're not. You don't really want like anything that's too. Concepts are too taxing. Like Homer cheating on Marge potentially, and
true.
All that sort of stuff is a bit weird. Like they'd be like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "You don't want to know."
I still feel though, like for some reason, when I was getting to that like 10-year-old kind of range where like I wanted the next step, and I didn't want something that felt like I was being spoon-fed kid shit. The Simpsons was one of those things.
Oh, I think that age, yeah, like 9, 10, 11, I think is probably perfect. But right, I think the age my kids are at the moment, they still believe in Father Christmas. But come on, they're not. Yeah. They're too young for The Simpsons.
I wonder, because Pokemon suggests also that the transition I took in the interim, I remember there was a channel called Fox Kids where it didn't have Pokemon, but it had Digimon. It had like the Jackie Chan Adventures or whatever it was called. and it had Sailor Moon, and I remember that was like one of my transitionary things of, I'm not watching, like I'm not watching the what were they called, the Twinkies, the
Tweenies.
The Tweenies.
Yeah,
I'm not watching that, but my brother can still watch that, and I'll move on. And then Cartoon Network was kind of like touch and go, where like maybe you'd stop watching. I don't know. Some things aged kind of well. Were like Dexter's Lab and Courage the Cowardly Dog and Ed, Edd and Eddy. That stuff stayed relevant. Ed, Edd and Eddy was my favorite for many, many years.
I'm trying to even. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. The problem these days is there's so much choice. Like you don't have to watch any. Like kids just watch absolutely anything they want. The first time my kids saw adverts, they were like, "What's this? Can we just skip this?" And I'm like, "No, sorry, that's not how it works. It's on live TV."
The other thing that's fucked up about kids, and it kind of taps into like, if you don't feel like you need to find that much new stuff because of how weirdly willing they are to watch the same shit they've already seen over and over again.
Yeah,
like the first time I watched one of my siblings with given an iPad with a movie playing on it, and they finished the movie and the credits were rolling, and they walked up to me and gave it to me. And I thought they were giving it to me as though to say, like, hey, I'm finished watching it. And they said, can you put it back to the beginning, please? And I was like, oh, these kids are wired different. There's something fucked up in their heads. This motherfucker's about to go and watch Despicable Me again for the 4th time in 8 hours.
When my eldest was... It's funny because we often talk about games that look really good, but they're not that well, but they're not very good games necessarily. The controls aren't that great, the writing's not that great, but they look really nice, and it's something that's becoming more and more apparent with like Unreal Engine 5. Movies have kind of done a similar thing in that CGI and animated movies in particular can look really nice and just be crap. Like they can be such low budget shit that someone managed to get half decent animators to make some okay animations for, and kids will watch that crap. My eldest, when he was 3. Or maybe a bit younger, maybe 2. There was a film we watched one Christmas called The Magic Reindeer. He watched it every day for the next 9 months.
What?
And I swear to God, we had to watch it every single day. And he even watched it some days he watched it more than once. He'd just go, Maggle Reindeer. We were like, what? And he's like, Maggle Reindeer, please. And then he'd want to watch The Magic Reindeer, and he'd watch it. It was like an hour long.
I don't even think I can like find it. All that's coming up is some weird like Finnish Norwegian thing called Nico 2, Little Brother Big Trouble.
That's it.
What?
That is it.
How would you even like put something like that on to begin with, though?
It was on like Netflix or something. It was on a streaming service, and it was a Christmas movie that we watched at Christmas, and it was called and they called it The Magic Reindeer, but it is about Nico and his little brother.
Right.
And it's because it's a sequel that we didn't realize, but halfway through
the Nico, it's in the Nico series originally. That I guess they realized there was an opportunity to just rebrand it as The Magic Reindeer and get Christmas traffic.
Exactly, because his dad is Prancer.
Right.
So, but it's weird because Prancer's left Nico's mum, and so then so Nico's then got a stepbrother, and she's with a new reindeer. So and she's annoyed with Prancer because she's like, you do too much dangerous stuff with him. It's like, when you actually think about it, it's such a weird plot for a kid's film. But my kid just loved 2 years old, 18 months. He just loved Magic Reindeer, and he wanted to watch Magic Reindeer all the time. Also, so, like I said, for 9 months we watched it every day.
Do you say he was 2 years old?
I think he was between 18 months and 2 years old, and we watched it every day.
At that point, he was coming up to the stage where, like, for a third of his life, he had watched The Magic Reindeer.
Yep.
What a strange thing. Like, think about how many years we've spent sleeping. For him, it was The Magic Reindeer.
And what's now is he doesn't remember it now.
Yeah. Crazy.
He's like, what? What film?
And he never will. You'll remind him every Christmas, and you'll be like, do you remember what's The Magic Reindeer every day? But no, shut up, Dad.
What's funny is my wife and I quote stuff from it because we've seen it so many times.
And he has no idea.
And he has no idea. And he's like, what's that? And we're like, it's Magic Reindeer. And he's like, what's the Magic Reindeer? Like, shut up. You made us watch it every day. Because it's something about there's a line where someone says, they say, oh, Grey Wolf was your brother. So someone says someone's was your brother, or they say anything about was your brother. The wolf in it, the enemy goes, was my brother. So my wife and I always come out with that. Was my brother?
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. And we still do it to this day, years later.
Even though the kids are none the wiser. And Jonesy, I hate to tell you, but they will remain none the wiser as they grow up and go through different phases, and one of which will no doubt be a rebellious phase where they stop listening to you and don't do anything they're told to do. And I'm sure that phase will be characterised by a newfound passion for the TV show South Park that will probably somehow still be running by that point, supported, in fact, by all the other forms of media that South Park continues to operate within, one of which looks like will be video games. Because at the end of the THQ Nordic Digital Showcase, we got a little confirmation that a new South Park video game appears to be in development at, what were they called, like South Park Studios? It was something as up front as that, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I actually can't remember. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. It basically just a kind of a little stinger at the end, as though to say, hey, a South Park game is being made, and it looks like THQ Nordic are publishing it. I think I'm right in saying that Trey Parker and Matt Stone are involved, because they were interviewed about a year ago saying that they were working on something at an in-house studio, and I presume that this is tied to the same project. Although questions have to be raised immediately. Where has it made sense? When Ubisoft were publishing South Park games for Obsidian, for example, to go in the RPG direction, what would a new team do with the open-ended license that is South Park? And what would you want to see? It's so weird.
That is weird. That is a good question. Like, I can't remember what the other two are called that I've played. The Sticky Butt, was it the Sticky Butthole?
No, the Fractured Butthole and the Stick of Truth.
That's it. Oh, I blended them together. The Sticky Butthole.
They came out in the other. Yeah, they came out in the other order. So the Stick of Truth was first.
Both actually really fun RPGs, and games that I meant for ages to go back and actually finish, because they were solid games. And they were really fun, and they were set in a cool universe. But yeah, this is a weird one. Like, I don't know where they could go with this. I don't know where I hope they go with it. I'm not really sure there are many things I would think are better than the RPG route. But
yeah, that's the weird thing, is that, like, you go back to when, much like with The Simpsons, I guess, South Park was one of those licenses through the late 90s and early noughties where it's just like, this is such a big deal, we have to make games, and they didn't know what they were doing. And so you had like really weird sort of like first-person adventure games, and you had kart racers, and you had all the things you'd expect, and it was just like square peg, round hole, because there was no... What we slowly realised, I think, with franchises like that, is that you need a really solid idea and fundamentals first that South Park could then adapt itself into.
Right.
And I don't know what that looks like. That's another, going back to the Marvel thing, that's another, problem I'm glad it's not my job to solve, I guess is what I'd say.
Yes, no, you're so right. It's almost like you have the IP and you want to just skin a game, but then you go, what's popular at the moment? What sort of games do people like? But so yeah, I can't imagine though, like first-person shooter, a South Park game, like a battle royale South Park game. Hold on, that would be sick. If they made a battle royale South Park game, that would be quite funny. But no, I don't know.
Honestly, I could see it being something where like they can't settle on a gameplay like tool set that makes sense. Like what does a South Park combat system look like? And that being a weird, difficult question to answer. And so they end up making something that's just like, imagine what the Stick of Truth and the Fractured Butthole were like, but without any combat. And so really it was just kind of like a almost side-scrolling adventure game that just perfectly mimicked that art style, but with maybe a little bit more emphasis on kind of like, I'm not going to say like classic like LucasArts style puzzle solving, but maybe a little bit more like throwbacky adventure game style ideas with like an inventory and
but then with maybe.
But just with the cool writing and sense of humor and character base that they're known for, without getting like caught up in a what does our combat system look like and blah 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 blah. It's just like making it.
I almost feel like the combat though was almost there just to extend the length of the game. It wasn't, but
like don't extend. Make an 8-hour long narrative driven South Park adventure game.
That would be cool. Yeah, no, I'd be down for that. I actually think the thing that in the end maybe made me switch off and stop playing wasn't the story stuff. It was the combat. It wasn't because it was bad. The combat wasn't bad, but it was like it took quite a long time to get
Yes.
through the game, and a lot of that was you're now fighting, like there's now 5 of you that are going to do a team-based combat against another team of people, and you're like, okay. And if you lost the fight, you had to do the fight again. You were like, oh, okay. And it was quite repetitive and it was quite long-winded. So actually, I mean, you might have hit the nail on the head. I mean, or even if it's not completely combatless, like a massively slimmed down combat system. No, hell, why not? Get rid of the combat. Have the puzzle, the story-driven puzzle game would make more sense. And also, you could have a fresh South Park story narrative without being, all the filler that the combat kind of provides and takes away from feeling like you're in that story, which it kind of did. The other ones did do that a bit. Like you were enjoying the stupid story, and then you had to do a 25-minute fight, and you're like, "What was I doing?"
Yeah. The only parts that it was when it really worked was when the fights would break the fourth wall. And I remember there was one very early on in the Fractured But Whole that did that wonderfully well. I can't remember any of the characters' names, but it was about like a character trying to set rules that like they were setting the rules within the world and the conversation, because obviously this was all playing out in the context of these were kids pretending these battles were happening, but you were actually taking control of them, and like a kid saying, "No, I'm not dead. You got that didn't kill me." And it's,
yes,
like that.
Wasn't that the fight in the back garden? And you go out there and there's like a camp fort or something.
I'm imagining a fight,
pillow fort or something.
No, I'm imagining a fight that happens, I think, early on in the Fractured But Whole, and it's in the bedroom in one of the houses, and it's like some character's cousin. I don't know South Park well enough. It's really And he's like a really whiny bitch, and he's like, if you do this move, I'm going to tell on you, and like, that didn't kill me, I'm not dead, that kind of shit. Like,
that was
can
wicked,
break the fourth wall in like terms of break the rules of the RPG mechanics you're getting to grips with, because it's also... The idea is these are kids pretending they're in these fights.
Do you know what's funny is
cosplaying, and messing around.
We've already mentioned
they're LARPing.
They're LARPing. We've already mentioned that the on this podcast, but It Takes Two did a great job of kind of connecting, of having a story which was like ran through, and then having different elements of different games without getting stuck in any one genre, which is almost like, I think is what you're alluding to there with the Fractured But Whole. The one problem they had was they got stuck in that turn-based combat system. But actually, you're right. If they'd have used it more as a stylistic to actually maybe have different types of games, but their version inside of the South Park world, that kind of will make more sense to me. So you have a section where you do have a turn-based fighting system in one area, but then you go to a different area and maybe there's another kid who's into something else and it kind of changes and some other stuff happens. That would be cool.
Yeah, sure. Anything that keeps it dynamic, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right, let's rattle through the last couple of notes, because I know we're running a little bit long here. I will just say that the publisher, THQ Nordic, confirmed at the end of that showcase that they have 43 games in development, and of those, 25 were still unannounced by the end of the showcase. That's if you include South Park. The gag was it's 26. South Park gets hinted at, goes down to 25. You know the deal. And whilst I don't think any of these two, neither of these two games, Jonesy, would come under that banner, because neither of them are THQ Nordic. They are still both Embracer Group adjacent by different means. Two other relatively big titles, one that's scheduled for release later this year, one early next year, have seemingly been leaked, courtesy of retail listings that I believe both came from Amazon. And whilst, yes, I know retail listings on Amazon can be a bit of a flaky source, these two were both pretty definitive when it came to the kind of leaks we get, in terms of not just the names of the titles and the platforms and the release dates, but also in both cases, box art, screenshots, digital deluxe and deluxe versions, pre-order bonuses, little blurbs and synopses about the game. So these, you've got to imagine, were both kind of like Gamescom or Gamescom sort of like in the vicinity of Gamescom scheduled announcements. Sorry.
I can't believe they keep doing this. Like, surely at this point, whoever the manager is like, look, we've fucked this up numerous times. Can we please don't click the publish button until the date on the sticky piece of paper which I've stuck to your cubicle wall? Okay.
I think the idea that there is an entire person with an entire cubicle devoted to managing the release dates for games such as like these is maybe slightly a generous suggestion. But you're right. Even if it's on a system level, I don't know how things like these happen, but the two games that have fallen foul of it this time, Jonesy, first of all, it's New Tales from the Borderlands, which is a sequel to Tales from the Borderlands, but it is a slightly controversial one. The reason being that was because Tales from the Borderlands was a Telltale Games joint that was actually quite well received and was seen to have some of the best world building, character building, and just general writing that the Borderlands series had maybe ever seen. This game, New Tales from the Borderlands, is not being developed by Telltale Games. It is in fact being developed by Gearbox themselves, who, following Borderlands 3 and Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, have had their name in the crosshairs just a little bit when it's come to the quality of their writing and their caliber of their comedy these days. And so the idea of a narrative-driven, basically only story game handled by Gearbox has some people concerned. Also,
that's a bit unfair. Man. Like Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, I don't. That really was there a problem?
It's not bad, but but I think more so when you reflect on Borderlands 3 and the way some of those characters were handled, especially. The other thing that happened in Borderlands 3 that people were not keen on was the way characters that were introduced in Tales from the Borderlands were reduced to nothing in Borderlands 3 and were way less interesting. Those characters were basically dealt a very bad hand by Gearbox, and now people are slightly concerned that this, new narrative-led Borderlands game or game from the world of Borderlands that had so much potential could now potentially be left in their grubby mitts. I don't know if that's harsh, but Tiny Tina's Wonderlands wasn't funny. It was just fine, and it was
that's fair.
By some good voice acting.
Right. No, yeah, I think that's fair. But I don't think I would say that it was, from what I heard of it anyway, I don't think I would say that it was like particularly bad. I don't think I would say it was bad. I don't think I would say. I think it should have been better. Okay. I
remember at the time thinking, I think I said it on the podcast, like, you went out and you got Will Arnett and you got Andy Samberg and you gave them this. Like, this was the best material you had for Andy Samberg. And yeah, the idea of an entire Telltale-style game written by even a semblance of that same team has, I don't think it's unfair to put like warning signs on it.
No, that's okay. I see where you're coming from. I suppose it's fair.
The other thing I will say that has people slightly concerned is the presence of a deluxe version of this game that also seems like it's going to be giving people a large sum of some form of currency. And again, how sort of like currencies and pre-order bonuses and deluxe versions fit into a Telltale-style narrative-driven experience. Some people are speculating pretty wildly online at the moment, and most of that speculation is not that pretty, Jonesy, as I'm sure you'd imagine.
Yeah, anytime you get currency tied into something like this, it's a little bit worrying, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
If you pay, you get a better experience. You get better writing if you pay more money.
Yeah, exactly. There's a little pop-up that comes up halfway through, like pay 99 cents to hear the other version of this joke.
I like that it's super robotic, like written by an AI, like really bad. But then if you pay more...
You mean like every piece of claptrap dialogue ever written?
Yes. But then if you pay like $5, then you get a dialogue that's been written by a university graduate. And then if you pay an extra $5, you pay $10, you get dialogues written by an actual games writer. And if you pay another $10, you get... And it's just the different... How good do you want the experience to be?
I want the tier of the game where you guarantee that Claptrap doesn't show up. That's the version of New Tales from the Borderlands that I'm playing. $80 version doesn't have Claptrap in it. He's written out conveniently. Then I'm
You're paying it.
100%. Jonesy, the other leak, and we'll close on this one, but I think it is actually a little bit more interesting, both in terms of the story of how we got to this point, and in terms of just yours and I's general interest in this title. It's the game that various people over the years, most notably its publisher, Deep Silver, have been adamant that it has never died, it has never been cancelled, it has never truly gone away, and now it does seem to finally be true. Dead Island 2, Jonesy, appears to not only be real, but may in fact be coming out in early 2023. We've got a box art, we've got screenshots, we've got a brief description of the verdant suburbia of Beverly Hills, and the quirky promenade of Venice Beach that apparently will play host to this title. We've got confirmation that there are going to be 6 fully customizable characters that you can play as, and you're going to be facing off against dozens of distinct zombie types. Everything that points to this game not just being real, but being ready to go, Jonesy. Are you ready for Dead Island 2 to be a thing in your life?
I am. Yeah, no, absolutely. Of course I am. Dead Island was wicked. I love the premise of it. I never actually finished it, to be fair, Dead Island. I should have done. I think when I got into like the middle game and it was just a lot of fetch quests, I was kind of like, I basically just stopped doing the game and just kept running around smacking zombies in their head with whatever I could find. But there's a lot of fun to be had in that series. I'm glad that they're making the game again. I'm a little bit apprehensive. Purely because
that's reasonable.
Yeah, because think about how long this game has been in development. Think how many hands this game has passed through. But it still kind of is following the outline which they announced back in the day. So then you kind of wonder, but hold on, the games have come on a fair bit since then. And zombie games has been a genre which has been beaten, almost to death. So if you're still kind of following a plan that you were following after the Dead Island 1, are you sort of not moving with the times? Should you have maybe come a bit further? Because what were we saying before? It was like 10 years or so since they started talking about this game.
Yeah, it was. So the initial pitch. So basically, what happened was around 2012 was when this all kicked up. There were conversations with Techland, obviously, who made Dead Island 1 about what they were going to do next. They decided that they were going to prioritize Dying Light and work with Warner Brothers, and that was when Jaeger, who in 2012 had just come off the back of the release of Spec Ops: The Line, pitched for Dead Island 2. Deep Silver and were happy with it, and they were at the races, and it was in development there for a few years. Then it was at Sumo Digital for a few years, and then finally it ended up at Dambuster Studios, who themselves have a weird history where Dambuster were formerly Crytek UK, and Crytek UK were formerly Free Radical. So in a roundabout way, Dead Island 2 is being made by the team that used to make Time Splitters games, but also not being made by the team that made Time Splitters games, because they also got to the point where they also just made Free Radical again, and the people that founded Free Radical left Dambusters, those that were there anyway, to go and join Free Radical again. So it's the people
who worked for the people.
Yeah, the people who worked for the people who made Time Splitters and also finished Homefront: The Revolution, which was not a good game.
Yeah. So it is like, okay, where's this game been? How's it looking? Because if it's a case that actually it's the actual development of this only started 5 years ago or 4 years ago or something, then fine, it might be absolutely fine. But if this is the case that this game has been being made in some form and and some elements of it haven't changed since they originally started talking about it, then you start to just worry, like, is this going to feel dated? Is this going to be like something maybe
Totally.
they should have canned, and they should have gone with something more up to date? It's interesting, obviously, like Techland have now made Dying Light 2, and which did okay. Like, launch came out, was pretty good, but is a very different game to Dead Island. It prioritizes a lot of other stuff. It's actually a game that doesn't really prioritize the zombies. It prioritizes the stuff that happens around that, and more about the people involved. And they're just kind of, which is weird because that always happens with like TV shows and films. They always get to the point where the zombies are almost a side thing. Whereas from everything I've read about Dead Island 2, sorry, it's not. It's still fully down into that world of no, you're fighting zombies in LA and in post-apocalyptic sort of post-virus, post-pathogen scenario. But you're super powered because you've got zombie juice because you're immune. And I'm like, interesting. Maybe you should have gone a bit further than that, and may come up with something a little bit different. But what do I know? Dead Island's fun. This might be.
I think that's a key word as well, right? It's like Dying Light 2 was a game that I thought very notably had no interest in adding any sense of humor to the zombie apocalypse.
No.
And Dead Island 1 wasn't a funny game, but the original trailer for Dead Island 2 seemed like the potential for the most self-aware take in this kind of like mini first-person zombie action game universe that we've got going on. And I hope some of that is restored, because there is still a gap for an aware, larger-than-life, zany, Saints Row-ified Dead Island-style game.
For sure, yeah.
But yeah. I don't know. There are screenshots out there now for anyone that wants to see them, and again, I'd love to get a second opinion on this. I look at the screenshots and they don't look real to me. There's something, when a screenshot looks staged, like almost like it's been like kind of a little bit sort of like put together and manipulated in such a way. Like there's one particular screenshot where the character is sort of standing in front of 4 or 5 zombies that are kind of like loosely positioned in front of them, and they're holding a kind of a modified wrench style thing in their right hand. And it looks like it's been photoshopped in sort of the placement of the zombies, the way they're lit. They don't look like they belong in that environment. Like it looks like a screenshot that's been made in Photoshop. So I'd love to see some footage of this game running in real time if that is the plan for Gamescom or beyond. That's kind of the next big thing that I feel like we need to see. But however you cut it, Dead Island 2 does appear to be back on the menu.
It's fun. No, I'm literally looking at the screenshot right in front of me that you were talking about. I completely agree. There's also a weird thing that, because it's like you said, like Dead Island wasn't funny, but the humor in, I think, Dead Island was the situationally where it was situationally aware. So you had the ludicrousness of the environment of that kind of like beach life. Oh, everything looks lush and lovely, but you were running up and smacking zombies in the head with like things you could find on the floor, like around you, and it was just kind of like ludicrous. But yeah, if they lean into that, I think that that would be the best way to go. If they are self-aware, if they do find the humor in it. It's funny because the screenshot you were talking about, the one thing that kind of irks me a little bit is the design on the zombies. I think are too horror game. They're a bit too. Like horror, a bit too dead, a bit too like Evil Dead kind of thing. They're not. I want them to be a bit more like dumb zombie that you're going to have fun making weird weapons. In
the other screenshots, they do look like that. Like one of the screenshots on the beach, which does look like more of a screenshot, perhaps an in-engine one, is like a roller skater kind of girl, and she's got like a skate helmet on and pink hair and sort of like knee-high socks. And the other one, you appear to be grabbing a kind of a Jersey Shore style dude by the neck, where he's got the slick back Homelander style hair, big aviators, and a gold chain.
Maybe you're right then. Maybe that other screenshot.
That fourth screenshot looks. Do you know what it looks like to me? It looks like a concept screenshot where like part of that image is real, like the background is real, like the big fat like bloater zombie is real. The other 3 zombies have been added over the top, and the hands holding the weapon have been added over the top. That's what it looks like to me.
That is super interesting. That is because you're right. You look at the other screenshots and they look much more in keeping with what I would have thought they would go for. But that other one just looks out of place. And because they've even said like there's specific types of like LA zombies, and you're right. The guy with the gold chain and the girl with the skater girl stuff. That's what they need to do. They need to lean into that comedy, that humor, that ludicrous, situationally aware. Like this is where the humor is of this game. It's dumb. It's over the top. What they don't need to do, though, is what they did in Dead Island 1, which is just turn the whole game into fetch quests. Oh, you're here. Can you go there? Can you go there? Can you go here? And you're just going like, I've just done the same journey 5 times for like multiple different people. Like, I need more.
Yeah.
But then I'm trying to think of the last game, which I thought was actually kind of aware of itself as a zombie game. I guess it's Dead Rising is the series, which is, kind of takes that ludicrousness and sort of runs with it. And there's space for that humor, though. There is absolute space for that humor. Because we've lost a lot of humour, Jamie. The games industry has lost some of its humour.
It has. Although, Jonesy, in finding that humour, they might have also found themselves with a lawsuit. Do you know why?
Why is that?
I'm going to read you a little excerpt from the Dead Island 2 description in the retail listing, and you tell me if anything strikes you as familiar. This is from the last sentence of the biggest paragraph. Meet larger-than-life characters, slay countless foes in exquisitely bloody detail, and evolve to become the ultimate zombie slayer. See you in Hell A.
Oh.
They have stolen Hell A from us. That's how we always described D3.
Hell A, we did. But but to be fair, but we didn't come up with Hell A.
Did we not?
No.
Okay, then maybe we're the ones with lawsuits on our hands.
I might have been the first person to say it because I know it's from a film. Well, I heard it originally in a film, which is, of course, Face Off. Because Castor Troy says he's going to give them I'm going to give them something that Hell A deserves because he's going to blow it up.
Lovely. Also, I will just say that reading this description does tick a lot of what what it sounds like you're hoping for from this game. Like the way they're describing it, talking about, they even make reference to LA themed variants of zombies. What was I going to say? For horror, dark humor, and over the top zombie slaying, an epic pulp adventure, stylish, vibrant, flooded with zombie infection, iconic gore drenched LA. Like, yeah, there's a lot of things here, a lot of like buzzwords that sound like they are going for something larger than life.
Okay, that sounds cool. That sounds good. I'm down for that.
We will find out more hopefully soon, and beyond that, we may even be able to play for ourselves if the speculated release date holds up. That is February 3rd, 2023.
Which is punchy. Like, given that we haven't heard anything, and then suddenly there's a leak and it's coming out Feb 23. Punchy.
This is like a Last Guardian situation, which is that if you're going to come back and say, hey, this game really does exist, you have to be able to come back and say, and also this is when it's coming out. Like, if you're in charge of Dead Island 2, you don't come back until, like, this game is it. It's happening. We're not cancelling it. It's going to release, and it's going to release it now.
Because if you came and said, hey, it's coming 2025, everyone's going to go, whatever.
Yeah. Or if it didn't have a release date. Imagine if Dead Island 2 came out without a release date. People would just shrug and go like, yeah, okay. Sure.
Yeah, we've heard that.
Yeah.
We heard it 10 years ago. We heard it 8 years ago. We heard it 6 years ago.
Literally. Anyway, we shall wait and see. And with that, Jonesy, that just about brings an end to what has ended up being, and I apologise for this as host this week, a bumper episode of the Super Show podcast. I must admit, I just got slightly swayed by the prospect of being acquired by the Embracer Group, and I thought the longer podcast we create, and the more we talk about Embracer, the more likely we are to be acquired and get that beloved Darksiders intellectual property in our grubby little mitts.
Hopefully.
It could still happen. Anyway. That's it, though, for this week. Thank you, Jonesy, for coming along on this ride with me.
Thank you, mate. Thank you for having me.
And we'll see. Yeah, I think it's up in the air as to whether or not it's going to be business as usual next week. I can't remember what Chris's situation is, and I know that my situation also might change in such a way where I'm not here. But I will say up front that regardless of who's here, who's hosting, and who's joining them, you should be tuning in next week because it will be the first post-Gamescom podcast, and we'll be able to break down everything Jeff Keighley serves up on opening night live, which I believe is happening on Tuesday, and that podcast will be going out like this one is that you just listened to on Friday, so hopefully we will see you there, same time, same place, same podcasting platform, same YouTube channel, same Patreon, everything's the same, we're the same except a little bit better each week, all the more reason to keep tuning in. Jonesy, once again, thank you. Everyone that listened, everyone that watched, thank you, and hopefully we'll see you there. Thank you, Embracers.
See ya.